When my husband passed away, I thought the pain of losing him was already the worst thing I could endure. But then, during the reading of his will, my heart shattered all over again. $6 million, along with the house where we had lived together for 25 years, all of it was left to our daughter. And me, the wife who had cared for him until his final breath, was given nothing but a decaying cabin in the woods, its roof leaking, its walls peeling, and its floorboards creaking with every step. I hadn't even processed the shock when my daughter turned to me, her voice sharp as a blade. "Go live with the pigs, you pathetic old woman." I walked away in the rain, my legs trembling, my tears mixing with the mud. I thought my life had ended there with a broken heart and an empty home. But only a few days later, in that dark, musty cabin, I discovered a secret Graham had left behind. A secret powerful enough to turn everything upside down and bring my daughter to her knees before the truth. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I am Marjorie Bennett, 67 years old. I have lived my whole life in a small town in Pennsylvania, where brick-paved streets lead to old wooden houses and church bells ring every Sunday morning. I used to be an elementary school teacher, spending nearly 30 years in the classroom before retiring early to take care of my family. All my life, I believed that love and sacrifice for my husband and child would be enough to guarantee happiness. But on the day Graham's will was read my husband, I realized there are bitter truths that even maternal love cannot cover. The reading of the will took place on an early spring afternoon, in Attorney Halvorson's office. The room smelled of old oak, the walls lined with shelves of worn leather-bound books. I sat on a frayed leather chair, my hands clenched in my lap, my heart pounding so loudly I feared the whole room could hear. Next to me was my only daughter, Sloane Bennett, 38 years old, successful attorney in the city. She wore an expensive black suit, her hair glossy and waved, her lips painted bright red. She sat upright, eyes fixed on the file in front of her, as if she already knew everything that was about to be announced. Attorney Halvorson, a man in his 60s whose glasses constantly slid down his nose, cleared his throat before opening the papers. "We will begin with the last will and testament of Mr. Graham Bennett," he said, his voice steady but heavy with weight. I held my breath. For 42 years, Graham and I had built everything together, the house on Maple Street, our savings, even the rose bushes I still tended on the porch. I thought everything would be divided fairly, or at the very least he would make sure I was provided for, the woman who stood by him through every hardship. Halvorson read, "I leave to my wife, Marjorie Bennett, the cabin on Old Quarry Road, along with everything inside it." I frowned. The cabin? It was a small, run-down wooden house Graham had inherited from his father. We had never lived there because it had no electricity, no running water, a roof that leaked, and rotting walls. I waited for him to read on, hoping this was only a minor part of the will. But then Halvorson continued, "I leave to my daughter, Sloane Bennett, the house on Maple Street, all bank accounts, investments, and the sum of $6 million. The whole world seemed to stop. $6 million, the house where I had lived nearly half my life, all of it went to Sloane. And me, I was left with nothing but a dilapidated cabin. I stammered, barely whispering, "There must be some mistake, right?" Halvorson looked up, his eyes flickering with a hint of pity. "Mrs. Bennett, I'm afraid not. This is the signed and certified will. The terms are very clear." I turned to look at Sloane. She was smiling. A cold, triumphant smile, without a shred of compassion for the mother who gave her life. Her eyes gleamed as if she had finally won what she had always craved, everything. We left the office in silence. The April sun beat down too brightly, so harsh it felt cruel. On the drive home, Sloane said nothing, but her glance at me in the rearview mirror said it all. "This is my house now, and you're just a guest." That night, I still cooked dinner as usual, roast chicken and potato salad, Graham's favorite. I hoped Sloane might soften, might realize something. But as I set the plates on the table, she said flatly, "Mother, we need to talk about living arrangements." I looked up. "What do you mean?" Her voice was firm. "This is my house now. And I think it's time you had your own space. You still have the cabin, remember?" I was stunned, putting the knife down on the table. "Sloane, I've lived in this house for 25 years. This is where your father and I built everything. That cabin has no electricity, no water, the roof is collapsing." She crossed her arms, raised an eyebrow. "That's your problem. I don't want this to get ugly. You have 1 week to pack." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "You can't do this. You're throwing your own mother out of her home." And then she shouted, her voice sharp and cutting the air, "Go live with the pigs, you miserable old woman." I froze. That sentence didn't just throw me onto the street, it erased every year I had spent raising and loving her. That night, I lay in the empty room, staring at the familiar ceiling, my heart twisted as if I were a stranger in my own home. I knew that in just 1 week, this place would no longer be mine. And I would have to leave, to a cabin I had abandoned my whole life. But I also knew one thing. My life wasn't ending here. I left the house on Maple Street after 25 years. In just 7 short days, I had to pack nearly my whole life into 3 old suitcases and a wooden box. In that box were yellowed wedding photos, a few of Graham's keepsakes, and the thick notebook where I had recorded recipes for the family. I loaded them into the trunk of my 1998 Honda Accord, a car so worn it screeched every time it started. I gripped the wheel, tears streaming down my face but teeth clenched so no sound came out. In the rearview mirror, Sloane still stood with her arms crossed on the porch, her gaze smug like a victor. I didn't look back again. If I did, I knew I wouldn't have the strength to leave. The road to Old Quarry Road was familiar yet strange. I remembered passing it with Graham years ago, never paying much attention. The dirt road twisted and jolted, flanked by maples and oaks turned rusty brown. The sound of tires crunching over gravel was hollow, like my heartbeat then. At the last bend, the cabin came into view. It stood isolated, lonely on a weedy plot of land, like a husk waiting to collapse. The cabin looked worse than I remembered. The paint had peeled off in wide patches, exposing gray wood weathered by storms. A window frame was broken, glass cracked. The porch steps wobbled with every gust of wind, creaking like a lament. Weeds rose to my knees, covering most of the path to the door. I stopped the car, my hand trembling as I fit the key into the rusty lock. The hinge screeched loudly as the door opened to reveal a dark, musty space. Inside, the air reeked of rot and dust. I set my suitcases on the floor, a cloud of dirt rising, making me cough. Weak light from the window revealed tattered curtains swaying. The ceiling was stained with leaks, some spots punctured enough to show the sky. Every step I took on the wooden floor creaked. A broken table, chipped chairs, and a cabinet with a missing hinge sat like relics. The first night was agony. No bed, just Graham's old blanket spread across the cold wooden floor. I curled up, clutching our wedding photo frame. Through the hole in the roof, stars shone bright, but I felt no romance, only despair. My tears soaked my sleeve. I cried not just for losing the house, but for losing the daughter I had given everything to. The next morning, I forced myself up. I inventoried what was left. A few burned-down candles, a dying flashlight, a thin torn blanket, dented pots scattered on the floor. I wrote them down in my small notebook, telling myself it was a start. Water was the first challenge. I remembered a public well half a mile from the cabin, deep in the woods. I carried 2 plastic buckets down the rough path. The wind cut through me, the buckets heavy, my shoulders burned, my hands blistered and bled. Once used to holding chalk and books, my hands now carried survival. I clenched my jaw, knowing no one else would do this for me. Days blurred with hardship. I cooked plain meals, watery potato soup, stale bread, well water. At night I sat by the candle's glow, staring at Graham's photo, listening to birds to drown out Sloane's cruel words. One morning, as I swept leaves from the porch, a figure approached. It was old Mr. Dempsey, a neighbor a mile away, in his 70s, thin but sharp-eyed. He nodded, leaning on his cane. "Mrs. Bennet, I heard you moved back here." I forced a smile. "Yes, this is my home now." He looked around, then lowered his voice. "Don't underestimate this land. It's worth more than you think." His words stunned me. Before I could ask, he patted my shoulder and walked away, fading behind the trees. Worth more than you think. I wrote it down in my notebook as if it were a clue. That evening, a message buzzed on my phone. It was from Sloane. "Don't bother my lawyer anymore. Everything is settled. Accept it, Mother." My hand trembled. I had never called her lawyer. Yet she felt the need to slam that door shut, just to remind me she still held power. I placed Graham's wedding photo on the rickety table, whispered, "You left me here, but I won't break, I promise." Then I blew out the candle. Darkness filled the cabin, but inside me, a flame of resolve was lit. The next day, my phone rang. It was Nancy, my sister-in-law. I thought maybe I'd hear some comfort. But her first words pierced me. "Marjorie, why did you cause a scene at the will reading? I heard you yelled at the lawyer, slammed the table, even threatened to sue if you didn't get money. You disappointed me." My chest tightened. "Nancy, that's not true. I just asked for clarification." I sat quietly the whole time. "Please believe me." Silence. Then a sigh. "Sloane told us everything. She said you embarrassed everyone. I don't know who to believe. Just let it go." One by one, relatives pulled away. A cousin texted, "Don't demand money from Sloane anymore. Everyone thinks you're greedy and unstable." Even church friends sent word, "Marjorie, maybe take a break from prayer group. People are talking. Find peace first." The worst was Helen, my sister. She called, blunt. "Marjorie, are you drinking? Sloane said you've been drunk every night talking nonsense. I'm worried." I was speechless. "Helen, I haven't touched a drop. Do you really believe her over me?" Silence. Then, "I don't know anymore." I hung up, my heart pounding, trapped in a cage of lies. Sloane hadn't just taken my house. She was stealing my name, my dignity. That afternoon, as I struggled to light damp wood, there was a knock. Mr. Dempsey stood there with a paper bag. "Brought some potatoes. Roast them, they'll warm you up." I couldn't speak, only nodded. He set them down, then looked at me firmly. "Don't believe the gossip. I know you, Marjorie. You're not greedy. People talk nonsense." Tears slipped down my cheek. His words were the first lifeline I had felt in weeks. "I believe you." That was enough to keep me afloat. That night, by candlelight, I opened Graham's old wallet. Between faded cards, my fingers found a cold piece of metal, a key. Heavy, unfamiliar, etched with tiny stars. And strange patterns. Not for a door, not for a safe I knew. I turned it in my palm, my heart racing. For the first time in weeks, despair loosened its grip. Graham had left me something. A secret. Perhaps the cabin wasn't just a burden. Maybe it was the beginning of everything. I clutched the key in my hand and whispered, "Graham, you didn't abandon me. You left me a clue, didn't you?" That night, I sat beside our wedding photo as the candle burned down and darkness spread. But inside me, for the first time in days, there wasn't only loneliness and humiliation. I felt a small flame flicker to life. The storm still raged around me, but in my coat pocket, a key waited to be unlocked, and I knew, from that moment on, my life would turn in a different direction. From the moment the key fell out of Graham's wallet, my mind could no longer rest. Every night, as the candlelight flickered across the wooden walls, I pulled it out, turned it over, and studied it, trying to guess what it might open. The etched star symbols were too sharp, too deliberate, to belong to something ordinary. I had a strong feeling that Graham, somehow, had left me a message. One drizzly morning, I decided I had to explore every corner of the cabin. I started with the living room, moving old furniture, running my hands along the cracks in the walls. The sound of rain dripping through the leaky roof beat like a restless drum urging me on. After hours of searching, I realized the house, though small, held many forgotten spaces. Everything looked old, but I knew Graham never kept things without meaning. Finally, my eyes landed on the wooden door leading to the basement. In all the weeks I had lived here, I had never dared to step down, afraid of the musty smell and the dark. But that day, I drew a deep breath, switched on the dying flashlight, and carefully walked down the creaking stairs. The basement was larger than I imagined, low ceiling, damp stone walls, spider webs draped everywhere. The earthy smell mixed with rotting wood made me grimace. I swept the beam of light across the space, one corner piled with soggy cardboard boxes, another hung with rusted garden tools. I was about to turn back when the light caught a wooden shelf pushed against the wall. Unlike everything else, this shelf seemed deliberately placed, blocking off a section of wall that didn't match the rest. My heart pounded. I stepped closer, laid my hand on the shelf. Dust coated it thick, but when I tugged gently, the whole shelf shifted. It wasn't fixed in place. Summoning all my strength, I dragged it aside. After a few seconds, the shelf gave way, revealing a dark metal wall. And in the middle of it, a small iron door appeared, no higher than my waist, with a lock engraved with the same star symbols as the key Graham had left. I nearly stopped breathing. My hand trembled as I pulled the key from my pocket. Metal scraped against metal with a harsh sound as I slid it into the lock. I turned it gently. A sharp click echoed through the silent basement, sending chills over my skin. Slowly, the iron door gave way, revealing a narrow compartment inside. There were 2 items: a thick envelope tied with old thread, and a small metal box, heavy in my hands. My heart raced as if it might burst out of my chest. I carried them to the rickety table, pulled out a chair, and with trembling hands, untied the envelope. The papers inside smelled of old parchment mixed with faded ink. I spread them under the flashlight. My eyes widened. Land maps spanning hundreds of acres, stamped by the county land office. Attached was a mineral rights certificate, everything in Graham's name, legally transferred to his wife. To me, I could hardly believe it. My hands shook as I traced each figure, each faded red seal. Alongside was a geological report, dated only 2 years ago. It confirmed the land around the cabin contained large quartz deposits with strong signs of other gemstones. On the edge of the report, I recognized Graham's familiar handwriting in blue ink. "Wait for the right time." I sank into the chair, tears spilling down my face. Graham had prepared this long ago. He let me endure being cast aside, driven from the warm house, but in truth, he had placed in my hands a fortune far greater. My trembling hands opened the small metal box. Inside, beyond a few more legal papers, was a folded letter sealed carefully. On the front it read, "To Marjorie." My chest tightened. I drew a long breath and opened it. Graham's handwriting appeared strong, steady strokes. "If you are reading this, it means you found the key and had the patience to follow it through. Marjorie, I know you will suffer when you hear the will, but this was the only way I could protect you. I left the house and money to Sloane not because I trusted her, but because I knew her greed. If I left it all to you, she would use every method, legal or not, to take it. I didn't want you to face her head on, so I gave her what she craved most. But in truth, the most valuable thing I had, I left for you, these mineral rights." I had to stop, gasping for breath. Tears blurred the ink, but I read on. "You've always thought of yourself as just a woman who sacrificed, a housewife who never truly owned her life. But Marjorie, I have seen the strength in you. You are stronger than you believe. These documents are freedom, a chance for you to live your years without depending on anyone. Sloane may think she has won, but in reality, she only holds an illusion. You are the one holding the future." My hand shook so badly the letter rattled. I pressed it to my chest as if I could hold Graham himself again. For a moment, the damp basement no longer seemed so dark. I felt him beside me, whispering strength into my ear. I sat there for hours, rereading each line. For the first time in weeks, I saw a clear path ahead. Graham had tested me, but he trusted I would endure. I folded the letter carefully back into the box. Candlelight flickered across the damp walls. But inside me, another light had been ignited. Not despair, but belief. I now held the power to change everything. That night, I returned to the living room, setting the box and envelope on the worn table. I touched Graham's photo frame and whispered, "You trusted me, Graham. Now it's my turn to prove I deserve that trust." I blew out the candle. In the dark, the key remained in my pocket, a symbol that my life had turned a page. Inside the metal box Graham left, I found another small folded paper tucked among the documents. His familiar handwriting read simply, 312, Norwood Bank. Just a few numbers and a bank's name, but I knew instantly. Graham was pointing me to another place, another hidden layer of this secret. The next morning, I put on my old heavy coat and drove my wheezing Honda toward the town of Norwood. Norwood Bank sat on Main Street, a red brick building with a green copper roof faded by time. I had passed it many times while living on Maple Street, never once imagining I would walk in to open a safe deposit box. My heart pounded as I stepped through the revolving door, approached the desk, and whispered, I'm here to open box number 312. Registered under Graham Bennett." The young teller with glasses typed a few strokes, then nodded. "Yes, Mrs. Bennett. This box has a designated heir listed as you. Please follow me." They led me into the secure basement, long corridors lined with cold steel, harsh fluorescent lights washing everything in pale white. I shivered not from the chill, but from the sense of stepping deeper into Graham's hidden memories. The vault opened with a special key and my signature. Inside lay a thick file bound with string and a brown envelope stuffed with papers. I carried them to the metal table, my hands trembling as I untied the string. The file contained another geological report, even more detailed than the one I had seen in the cabin. Charts and diagrams mapped quartz veins, amethyst deposits, and hints of other gemstones. Most striking was a drafted contract between Graham and a mining company dated just 6 months before his death. The company's proposal was clear: purchase all mineral rights for $7 million, with an additional royalty if the reserves proved higher than estimated. I gasped. That figure alone was more than everything Sloane had inherited in the will. Graham had known the true value of this land, and he had chosen to entrust it to me in a way Sloane could never imagine. But I also knew I couldn't rush in. I needed someone to protect my interests, an independent lawyer untouched by Sloane or the old firm. After days of discreet inquiries, I found a name: Ariella O'Connor, a seasoned attorney known for her expertise in land and resource law. We met in her small office, lined with thick books and mineral maps. Ariella listened to my story, then carefully reviewed all the papers Graham had left. After nearly an hour, she looked up through her black-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Bennett, these documents are entirely legitimate. These mineral rights are registered in your name alone, separate from your daughter's inheritance. That means Sloane has no claim." I exhaled, as if a boulder had been lifted from my chest. But Ariella's tone grew firm. However, before negotiating with any company, you must obtain a new, independent geological report. The land may be worth even more now. If so, 7 million is just the floor. Don't rush. I nodded. Can you recommend someone I can trust? Ariella smiled. I know just the person. Dr. Nolan Pierce, over 30 years in the field, highly respected, meticulous. The next day, I met Dr. Pierce. A tall, lean man with salt and pepper hair. His eyes lit up whenever he spoke about rocks and soil. He came to the cabin with a case of strange tools, drills, a handheld microscope, a geomagnetic reader. For 3 days straight, he combed through every inch of land, taking samples, making notes. I followed with water and bread, anxious yet hopeful. On the third evening, as the sun dipped low, he returned to the cabin, laid a thick file on the table, and said, "Mrs. Bennett, I'll be blunt. This land is a treasure." Beyond the obvious quartz reserves, I found multiple veins of high-quality amethyst. More importantly, there are clear signs of green tourmaline, a rare gem with immense market value. Managed correctly, your rights here aren't just worth 7 million. They could be worth double, even triple. I froze, gripping the edge of the table to steady my shaking hands. His words pierced me not from greed, but from the realization Graham had been right. He hadn't abandoned me. He had given me a chance at a new life, greater than anything before. That was when I knew I wasn't just an old woman cast aside. I was the one holding a secret bigger than everything. Have you ever been underestimated, only to discover your own hidden strength? If so, I'd love for you to share your story in the comments. I would truly treasure hearing from you. That night, by candlelight, I opened Graham's letter again. I read his words. "I know you are strong enough to endure, and you will find what I left for you." This time, I didn't cry. I believed. I knew. My life was not ending in that broken cabin. I was not a miserable old woman thrown aside. I held a truth Sloane could never imagine. And I began to believe, deep in my heart, that the road ahead wasn't just survival, it was a chance to rise and reclaim everything, exactly as Graham had hoped. Dr. Pierce's report lay on the table. I flipped through page after page of dense charts and maps. Pierce sat across from me, his eyes bright in the golden light. He spoke slowly, deliberately. "Mrs. Bennett, this land is worth no less than $10 million. With the right negotiation, it could reach 15 million, and that's just for the current reserves. With royalties properly structured, you could secure income for years." My hand trembled on the pages. $15 million, far beyond anything Sloane had inherited. Graham had known all along. He had never left me empty-handed. The next day, I brought the report to Ariella's office. She read carefully, tapping her pen. Finally, she looked up. "Marjorie, this report is solid. My advice, do not sell quickly. Don't let anyone sense the true value before you're ready. You need time to learn how contracts work, to understand the game. If you sign blindly, you'll lose your advantage." I nodded, my heart pounding. Ariella was right. I needed to prepare quietly, patiently, just as Graham had written. We talked for 2 hours, crafting a plan. I had to keep my cover intact. To the outside world, I remained the poor widow in the rundown cabin, beaten down by life. Only then would Sloane and the town leave me alone. That evening, I sat in my car outside Ariella's office, realizing the irony. To protect a fortune, I had to pretend to have nothing. That night, I made a list on the wooden table. 1. Leave the cabin exterior untouched, no repairs. 2. Secretly install electricity and underground water. 3. Learn contract terms from Ariella. 4. Avoid direct contact with Sloane, never let her suspect. The next morning, I hired a discreet crew from another town. paying them extra to keep quiet. 2 days later, when the first light bulb flickered on in my dark cabin, I sat down and wept. That light wasn't just electricity, it was hope. With power and water, I began to study. Ariella handed me a thick packet on contract clauses. I underlined each term: royalty, profit share per ton mined, environmental protection, responsibility to avoid lawsuits later, force majeure, clauses to protect rights during natural disasters or war, and, for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was preparing for battle. Strange words slowly became tools in my hands. With a red pen, I underlined and scribbled notes in the margins: must demand at least 7 to 10% royalty, or require clear environmental liability clauses. Every evening, instead of crying like I did in those first weeks, I sat under the desk lamp and wrote out business scenarios. One page read, sell all mining rights, quick profit. Another page, lease long-term, steady income for years. I compared them, weighed them, and asked myself what I really wanted. My hands shook, not from weakness, but from excitement. I had never felt this way before. I, Marjorie Bennett, 67 years old, was deciding my own fate, not Graham, not Sloan, no one else. One late night, I looked up at the wooden ceiling stained with leaks, the yellow electric light casting shadows across the cracks. Suddenly, I laughed a laugh both bitter and sweet. The cabin my daughter spit on, calling it a pigsty, had now become the place where I was reborn. Right here, I was building a new life. I no longer saw myself as the abandoned mother, the discarded wife. I saw myself as a woman quietly preparing her counterattack. I understood Graham's plan. He let me endure humiliation so I could learn to stand on my own 2 feet, and I was doing it. I gripped his letter, rereading the line I already knew by heart: wait for the right time. Every time I read it, my heart thudded with certainty. Yes, I would wait. But when the time came, I would strike. For the first time in years, I went to bed without bitterness weighing me down. I saw the road ahead clearly, step by step, steady and sure. I knew Graham was somewhere watching, smiling, whispering that I was finally moving in the right direction. In a small town like Norwood, nothing stays secret for long. News spreads like sparks on dry straw, one whisper at the market, and the whole town knows. And lately, the name on everyone's lips was my daughter's, Sloan Bennett. People said she had just driven home a bright red Mercedes convertible, gleaming like it had rolled straight off the lot. A woman from church whispered she saw Sloan carrying brand new Louis Vuitton bags, her heels clacking against the tile floor. Then more news. She was planning a trip to Paris, not for work, not for study, but simply to shop until she dropped. Folks looked at each other with a mix of awe and disapproval. Some shook their heads. When money comes too suddenly, people just spend it all without thinking of tomorrow. I listened but stayed silent. Outwardly calm, inside me sharp pangs twisted. I remembered Graham's words in his letter. Sloan is impatient. She always wants everything right away. And it hurt, because he was right. One morning, at the Norwood Bank, I went in to withdraw a little cash and froze when I heard Sloan's voice echo from the loan office. Her tone was half sweet, half demanding. Yes, I'd like another loan. I can mortgage the Maple Street house and my inheritance from my father. I need capital for a very promising personal project. I stood rooted, my whole body stiff. In just a few months, she was already willing to mortgage everything. $6 million and the house Graham had spent a lifetime building, now nothing more than leverage for her schemes. At the counter, a young teller whispered to her coworker, not noticing I was near, "I've never seen anyone burn through money like this. At this rate, even $6 million won't last 10 years. That sentence echoed in my mind all day. Back at the cabin, I opened Graham's old notebook and picked up a pencil. If Sloan spent $50,000 a month with the cars, designer clothes, parties, and travel, she'd blow through it all in less than 10 years, and that was without counting the loans and interest piling up. Seeing the numbers on paper, my hand shook. More than ever, I realized Graham had foreseen it all. A few days later, I passed by the biggest fashion boutique in town. Through the glass, I saw Sloan twirling in a shimmering silver dress, grinning at the clerk, clutching more bags. Each swipe of her card brought a smile, but I recognized it wasn't joy, just a fleeting high. Her eyes were empty, the gaze of someone spending not from need but from fear of tomorrow. I stood outside a long time, aching inside. I remembered her as a child. At 7 years old, tugging at my sleeve in the market, "Mom, I want this, I like that." I always gave in. Graham would shake his head with a smile. "You're spoiling her." Back then, I thought it was innocence. Now, watching her burn money, I knew the habit of wanting everything had never left. The town buzzed with more stories. They said she threw a lavish birthday party, hired a band, even fireworks. Others whispered she was eyeing a risky real estate project in California. I nodded and let it pass, but deep down I was heavy with sorrow. Every night I sat alone in the cabin and wrote in my journal, "Sloan is digging her own grave. I don't need to rush. I only need to wait." Sometimes memories of little Sloan came back, me cradling her through fevers, sitting through school plays, every parent-teacher meeting. All those years now felt like someone else's story, no longer connected to the stranger I saw in that boutique mirror. Some townsfolk asked me, "Mrs. Bennett, you must be so proud your daughter's famous all over town." I only smiled. Proud? How could I be, knowing every dollar she spent was another brick pulled from the house Graham built with his life? I chose silence. I didn't need to fight, didn't need to argue. Money runs out. When debt crushes her, when friends vanish, when pride has no ground left, Sloan will face reality. And me, I just needed to sit still, observe, and wait. That night, I sat before Graham's wedding photo. The yellow lamplight fell across his face. I whispered, "You were right, Graham. She doesn't know how to keep it. But I'll wait. When the truth comes out, I'll be ready." For the first time in months, I felt my heart lighten. In its place was a rare clarity. A collapse was inevitable. And when it came, I would be standing strong, holding the secret Graham had left, the one thing Sloan would never touch. Life always turns in ways I once would have laughed off. But I had gone from being cast out by my own daughter, living in a cabin with a leaky roof and sagging porch, to sitting in a bright office, signing a contract worth tens of millions. That day, in Ariella O'Connor's office, the air smelled of oak and fresh paper. I sat across from her, staring at the thick contract stamped in bold red. Ariella, her brown hair tied back, sharp eyes softened by warmth, slid the contract toward me. "Mrs. Bennett," she said firmly, "this is Northern Ridge Mining's official offer. They agree to pay $12 million upfront and 5% royalty on mining revenue for the next 30 years. I've reviewed every clause. It's all in your favor. This is one of the safest and smartest deals I've ever handled." My palm was damp as I gripped the silver pen, the words on the page blurred with tears. That day, Sloan screamed, "I belonged with the pigs." I thought my life was over. Yet here I was, Graham, though gone, still protecting me in his own way. I signed. The pen scratched a bold line across the paper. In that moment, my heart pounded like a drum. I knew my life had turned a corner. Ariella didn't stop there. The next day, she helped me set up a personal trust. "Think of it as a steel shield," she explained. "Even if Sloan sues or anyone tries to contest it, they can't touch this money. It's yours, solely yours." I looked at her through tear-filled eyes and whispered, "Thank you." My whole life, I had let others decide for me, first Graham, then Sloan. Now, for the first time, I was in control. I kept everything secret. Despite $12 million in future royalties, I left the cabin unchanged. The paint still peeled, the porch still sagged, the windows still cracked. Passers-by still pitied me. One day, Mrs. Gonzalez, the florist on the corner, stopped by with a bag of bread. "Mrs. Marjorie, I know times are hard. Take this, eat something." I smiled, accepted it, and thanked her without shame. Sometimes, to protect the truth, you let people believe you're weak. Let them think I was just the poor old widow abandoned by her daughter. I didn't mind. While I quietly secured my future, news of Sloane flooded the town. They said she sold off cars, canceled her Paris trip, and kept appearing at the bank with a tight face. One morning, I stopped at the pharmacy for herbal tea, and there she was. Sloane stood at the counter, eyes darkened with circles, hair messy, makeup smudged. Her voice cracked as she spoke to the pharmacist. "Can you check if my insurance covers this? I need stronger sleeping pills, and more for anxiety." I froze behind the shelf, my chest tightening. Before me wasn't the confident, arrogant daughter who once threw me out. It was a broken woman clinging to pills just to keep going. She turned, and for a second our eyes met. Gone was the challenge, the scorn. All I saw was despair. She looked away and walked out without a word. I left with trembling hands. I felt no triumph, no joy, only deep sorrow. Graham's lesson for her had begun a harsh one she had to endure herself. That night, I sat at the wooden table, Graham's letter under the yellow lamplight. I read again. "Wait for the right time." I whispered, "Maybe that time is coming." And indeed, a few days later, the phone rang in my quiet cabin. The screen lit up with Sloane's number. My breath caught. How long had it been since she last called? I answered. Her voice quivered, weak, like a lost child. "Mom, I need to see you. Please, I need you." I closed my eyes, letting her sobs echo through the line. Never in my life had I heard her sound so small. No longer the sharp lawyer, no longer the woman who screamed I belonged with the pigs. Just Sloane, broken, desperate, pleading. I drew a deep breath, keeping my tone calm. "All right, Sloane, come, I'll be here." When I set the phone down, I sat in silence. Outside, the wind swept through the trees, the leaves rustling like Graham's whisper. I knew the moment I had both dreaded and awaited had finally come, and I was ready. That night, the wind roared through the old trees on Old Quarry Road. I sat alone in the cabin, my unfinished journal before me, when I heard the sound of an engine in the distance. Not the smooth hum of a Mercedes, but the rough sputter of an old sedan. I stepped onto the porch, gripping the doorframe, and saw Sloane. She stepped out, utterly drained. Her business dress was wrinkled, heels scuffed, hair tied in a rushed knot. She stood under the porch light, red-eyed, looking at me as if I were her last hope. "Mom," her voice cracked, trembling, I'm in trouble. I owe $400,000. If I don't pay by the end of this month, I'll lose everything. The house, the firm, my reputation." I stood there, silent, staring. Memories crashed back: the day she screamed at me to live with pigs, the day she tossed our family mementos onto the lawn, the day I left Maple Street in tears. I breathed deeply, voice steady but sharp. "Do you remember what you said to me, Sloane? You called me a burden, a miserable old woman. You threw me out, stripped me of every photo and keepsake. And now you come begging for help?" She crumpled onto the porch steps, covering her face. "Mom, I know I was wrong. I was stupid. I thought money would last forever. I thought I was strong, but I've only destroyed everything." In that moment, I stood at a crossroads. Part of me wanted revenge, to turn away, let her drown in her arrogance. But another part ached because no matter what, she was still my child, the same girl I once held through the night. Slowly I said, "All right, Sloane. I'll help you, but not the easy way. I can't throw money at you just to see you burn it again. If you truly want a chance, you'll have to pay the price. You'll have to change." She lifted her tear-streaked face. Desperate. "Tell me. Anything. I'll do it." I sat on the old porch chair, pointed at the spot in front of me. "Sit down. Listen carefully." Then I laid out the terms. "First, I will lend you $500,000 more than your debt, enough for you to breathe again. But this is a loan, not a gift. You'll repay it over 10 years at 5% interest. Banks would demand worse, but I'm giving you a chance." Sloane nodded frantically, whispering, "Yes, I agree." I continued, my voice stern. "Second, for the next 5 years, every Saturday you must come here, to this cabin, and work alongside me. Sweep the porch, tend the garden, fix the roof, whatever task I assign. You will learn what real labor means, without designer dresses or lavish parties." She froze for a moment, her eyes wide, then bowed her head. "All right, Mom. I'll do it." "Third," I pressed, "you will write a letter of apology, honest and complete, admitting everything you did to me, from throwing me out of the house to the lies you spread among our relatives. You will read that letter aloud in front of the whole family this coming Christmas. Do you have the courage to do that?" Her face went pale, lips trembling. "Mom, that's humiliating." I looked straight into her eyes. "Humiliating? Did you feel humiliated when you threw me out on the street? Did you feel humiliated when you called me a burden? If you don't have the courage to face your mistakes, then you don't deserve forgiveness of any kind." Tears rolled down Sloane's cheeks. She nodded, each motion heavy. "I'll do it. Mom, I'll do it." I sighed softly. My heart ached, yet felt lighter at the same time. Perhaps Graham, wherever he was watching, and he would understand why I chose this path. I wasn't giving Sloane free forgiveness. I was giving her a chance to redeem herself. A few days later, I kept my promise. I transferred $500,000 into Sloane's account through the trust fund we had set up. I knew the money was safe, tightly bound by contract, and Ariella had made sure every clause was ironclad. Sloane used the money to pay her debts. I heard her creditors stopped harassing her, and her small law firm was saved. But I also heard whispers, "Miss Bennett looks worn out, must be under a lot of stress." I said nothing. I simply added one line to my journal: "The lesson has begun." On the first Saturday, Sloane arrived at the cabin. Gone were the business suits and designer coats. She wore old jeans and a faded t-shirt. Her steps were slow, her face still carrying traces of pride not yet gone. I handed her a straw broom and pointed to the porch. "Sweep. It's been covered in dry leaves for too long." She glanced at me, hesitated, then bowed her head and began. Her movements were stiff, clumsy. The sun beat down, sweat rolling down her forehead. Fingers once used to pens and keyboards blistered and turned red. I stood at the doorway, quietly watching. In those awkward gestures, I saw something new: humility. Not humiliation, but the first time my daughter learned to bend, to accept that money cannot buy survival. I said nothing. I let the wind blow, let the broom's scraping fill the air. But in my heart, I knew this was only the beginning of a long journey. And for the first time in years, I saw a glimmer of hope flicker in Sloane's eyes, the very light Graham must have wanted me to keep alive. In the months following that knock on my door, my life shifted quietly but unmistakably. Sloane still came to the cabin every Saturday. At first, she swept leaves and scrubbed floors with a scowl, each stroke heavy as if punishment. But gradually, I noticed her shoulders no longer stiff with defiance, her eyes no longer filled with resentment. One time, when I handed her a bucket to wash the wooden porch, Sloane looked up at me and whispered, "Mom, I've never done things like this before, but I'm starting to feel like I need them. They make me quiet." It was the first time I heard her voice without excuses, without the armor of false confidence, just truth, plain and fragile. And so the weeks passed. We began talking more. At first, just short phrases, "I'm done sweeping," or "Do you need anything else?" But then, one afternoon as we sat resting under the porch, Sloane suddenly asked, "Mom, when I was little, did you ever think I'd become someone like this?" I stayed silent for a moment, staring at the bare winter branches. Finally, I answered, "I thought you'd be strong. But maybe your father and I gave you too much, so you never learned how to truly stand on your own." Sloane bowed her head. I saw tears drip onto hands now roughened by weeks of brooms and shovels. I didn't hug her, didn't rush to speak more. Forgiveness cannot come from a single sentence, nor can it be rushed. Forgiveness takes time, takes action, and I knew both of us were relearning how to be mother and daughter. Then Christmas came. Linda's house, Graham's sister, was always where the family gathered for the holidays. Last year, I hadn't dared show my face, knowing everyone believed Sloane's lies. But this year, I went. I went not to prove anything, but because the truth needed to be spoken. The living room glowed with lights. The Christmas tree heavy with ornaments. The smell of roasted turkey thick in the air. Laughter filled the space, but when I walked in, a few eyes lingered, hesitant. I held my head high, took a seat, and stayed quiet. When everyone gathered at the table, I gave Sloane a small signal. She had prepared the apology letter weeks before one of the conditions I set. I watched her stand, hands trembling with the paper. The room hushed, only the crackle of the fireplace remained. Her voice, hoarse, broke the silence. "I know many of you still believe the story I told that Mom caused chaos at the will reading, that she was greedy and wanted to steal the estate. But today, I need to tell the truth. It was all a lie. I made it up to protect my own selfishness." The room froze. I saw Linda's hand stop mid-slice on the cake, her eyes wide. Sloane went on, her voice breaking. "I drove Mom out of Dad's house. I called her a burden. I took away even the family keepsakes. I humiliated her, the woman who sacrificed her entire life for me. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know she never did anything wrong. All the fault is mine." A sob broke from the far end of the table. Someone dabbed their eyes with a napkin. Around me, I saw faces glistening with tears. When Sloane finished, silence hung heavy. Then, Linda rose, crossed the room, and embraced me. Her voice trembled. "Marjorie, I'm so sorry. I believed what Sloane said. I turned my back on you. I was wrong." I held her, tears soaking her shoulder. I spoke no reproach, only whispered, "Now you know the truth. That's enough." After dinner, when the family gathered by the tree, Sloane sat beside me. She no longer carried pride, only quiet humility. "Mom," she said softly, "I've been thinking. I can't keep doing the same work, fighting, clawing, taking. I want to shift to something else, helping families drowning in debt, guiding them to solutions instead of pushing them deeper. Maybe that's how I make amends." I looked at my daughter, and for the first time, in years, I saw a seed of goodness in her eyes. Not polished words, not pretense, just a tiny spark but enough to ignite hope. I laid my hand over hers, speaking slowly. "Forgiveness doesn't come from one apology. It's a journey, built from small actions every day. I can't say I've fully forgiven you yet. But I believe, if you keep changing, you'll find yourself again. And you'll find me too." She bowed her head, tears dripping onto our joined hands. Christmas night ended in the warm glow of lights and carols drifting from the street. I sat by the window, watching the first snowflakes fall. A strange peace filled my heart. I knew Graham was smiling somewhere. He hadn't left me only wealth or mining rights. He left me lessons in patience, in motherhood, in renewal, and above all, he gave me the chance to reclaim the daughter I thought I'd lost forever. A year after that Christmas night, sitting in the old cabin with the fire flickering, I knew it was time to close a chapter. I was no longer the woman cast out of Maple Street, trembling and broken-hearted. I had endured pain, uncovered Graham's secret, and learned to stand on my own. Now, I needed a new beginning, a place worthy of being called home. I chose a small house on a hill, not far from the valley where I grew up. From the porch, I could see the whole valley spread out like a green carpet, dotted with wooden houses, wheat fields, and a sparkling river. Each morning, sunlight streamed through the windows, flooding the house in gold. It felt like returning to childhood, sitting on grassy slopes, dreaming of a peaceful home. The house wasn't large, but it was sturdy and warm. A wide wooden porch, a rocking chair where I read or watched the view, a small kitchen, bright and always smelling of coffee and cinnamon in the mornings. I decorated simply, keeping a few old photos of Graham, a few mementos from my teaching years. I didn't need luxury, quiet, and control over my life were enough. The day Sloane came, I remember vividly. She drove up in an old sedan, paint peeling, a far cry from the luxury cars she once flaunted. When she stepped out, she froze, eyes wide in disbelief. "Mom, this is your house?" Her voice shook. I nodded, invited her in. In the kitchen, I poured hot cinnamon tea, the scent filling the room. Sloane sat, her eyes roaming, her fingers brushing the freshly painted wooden railing. "I don't understand. Where did you get the money?" she asked, bewildered, almost whispering. I set down the cup and pulled a small wooden box from the drawer. Inside were Graham's letter, the mining maps, and the papers I had kept hidden all this time. I told her everything from the key in the old wallet, the iron door behind the shelf, the thick envelope in the damp basement, to the contract with Northern Ridge Mining. I told her about nights spent poring over clauses, about Ariella O'Connor's guidance, about the moment I signed the $12 million deal with royalties to last decades. Sloane sat in silence, tears streaming by the time I finished. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. "Mom, you could have abandoned me. You could have let me drown in debt, and no one would have blamed you. I did terrible things to you, but you still saved me." I looked at her, my voice steady and slow, "Not because you deserved it, Sloane, but because I'm still your mother. No matter what you did, I couldn't turn away completely." She lifted her tear-streaked face, eyes shining through the tears. I saw no arrogance there anymore, only gratitude and genuine remorse. From that day on, Sloane truly began to change. She worked tirelessly to repay her debt early, taking on more and more cases. No more business suits, no designer bags. She dressed simply, focused on work. She accepted the hardest cases, representing poor families being pressed by banks, helping them negotiate to keep their homes. Some nights she returned late, ink on her hands, shadows under her eyes, but with a strange sense of fulfillment. "I've never felt like I was doing the right thing until now," she told me one evening as we sat on the porch overlooking the valley. Every Saturday she came to my house, working as promised. Sweeping leaves, painting walls, helping me with dinner. I noticed every detail, hands once soft, now calloused, posture once haughty, now bent tenderly over the flowers. These small acts became the bridge reconnecting us. No more fights, no more cruel words. Instead, there were quiet moments of peace, sitting side by side, listening to the wind in the trees and the twinkling lights of town below. I realized that motherhood, even cracked and scarred, could be repaired. Forgiveness isn't erasing the past, but giving the future a chance. I didn't erase the painful memories, but I left them as reminders to see the value of the change today. I learned to enjoy independence. I made my own decisions, from fixing the porch to managing the trust. I no longer feared dependence. And at the same time, I learned to open my heart to forgiveness, not with fancy words, but with patience, watching my daughter slowly grow again. Each evening, I sat on the rocking chair, watching the valley bathe in sunset light. I thought of Graham. I believed he was proud, seeing me not just surviving, but truly living. He would smile knowing I had found another version of Sloane, a daughter who worked, who humbled herself, and was learning to love again. The house on the hill wasn't just a shelter, it was a symbol of rebirth. A place where I proved I hadn't fallen, where my daughter and I rebuilt the bridge we once burned. Every wall, every door carried new faith that after everything, we still found each other. 3 years after that night, Sloane knelt on the cabin porch. I received news that made my heart skip. My daughter had repaid her entire debt 3 years earlier than required. The confirmation from the bank, printed clear in black and white, lay on the table. I sat silently for a long time, hand trembling as I traced the letters. In my mind, I saw the proud, reckless girl who once screamed cruel words at me. And now she had walked a long road, shouldering responsibility, climbing out of the pit on her own. I couldn't hide my smile. Sloane was no longer the daughter who only knew how to spend money like water. She had learned discipline, learned to work, learned to think of others. And I had learned something too. Sometimes, loving your child doesn't mean sheltering them, it means letting them taste the consequences, and then offering a hand at just the right moment so they still have a chance to make things right. Sloane's new work moved me to tears more than once. She didn't choose the easy path for quick money. She decided to rebuild her career from the ground up. Her small office sat on a modest street in town. Just one room with an old wooden desk, bookshelves against the wall, and a few photos from clients left behind as thanks. One afternoon, I stopped by and saw her sitting across from a young couple. They were worried because the bank was about to take their house. Sloane listened patiently, then gently pointed out possible options. I sat in the corner, quietly watching. In every word, every nod, I could see the change deep within her. She was no longer a woman who only knew how to spend. She had become a companion, a rescuer of hope for others. When the couple left with relieved smiles, Sloane turned to me and whispered, "Mom, helping a family keep their home means more than any car or dress I ever bought." I nodded. Warmth spread through my chest. Maybe Graham would be smiling proudly too, if he could have witnessed that moment. At home, I hung Graham's photo right next to the mining contract. For me, it was a way to say a belated thank you. Because of him, I had the chance to stand firm, the protection strong, enough to challenge my daughter while also giving her a path back. One evening, as we sat on the porch under the moonlight, I pointed at the photo and the contract beside it and said, "Do you see, money itself isn't wise. The person holding it must be wise. Otherwise, money will swallow you whole." Sloane laughed, a clear laugh tinged with regret. "You're right, Mom. I let money burn through my hands, and I learned that lesson at the highest cost." We both burst out laughing together for the first time. A mother and daughter's laughter echoed through a summer night without the weight of darkness. I realized that, in the end, we had both finished a shared lesson. I learned how to release resentment, and Sloane learned how to live with humility and responsibility. That summer night I sat on the porch, watching the town lights twinkle down in the valley. The wind carried the scent of freshly cut grass, cicadas sang loudly. My heart felt more at peace than ever before. The phone rang. On the other end was Sloane's voice, trembling but full of emotion. "Mom, thank you for not abandoning me. Without you, I wouldn't have anything left. I owe you not just money, but an entire new life." I looked up at the starry sky and gently replied, "My girl, I want nothing more than to see you live with kindness. That's the greatest gift of all." I hung up, my heart overflowing with happiness. Wealth, to me now, wasn't in the numbers, it was in the moment I knew my daughter had truly changed. Graham was right. In the letter he left behind, there was a single short line that carried an entire world. "You are stronger than you think, and Sloane can change too." Years ago, when I first read it, I saw it only as a kind of comfort. But today, sitting in my house on the hill, watching the daughter who once drove me to despair now slowly walk back onto a decent path, I finally understand what it truly means. I have become stronger than the woman I once was, the woman who trembled while clutching a few suitcases as she was cast out of her own home by her daughter. I did not collapse. I did not disappear. I stood up, reclaimed my voice and my right to own my life. And Sloane, the daughter who once worshipped money like a god, who once made me cry through endless lonely nights, has now learned to live with responsibility and compassion. The house on the hill, the distant valley lights, the hum of summer cicadas, and the gratitude shining in Sloane's eyes, all of it stands as proof that, in the end, family bonds can be reborn. They are not perfect, not flawless, but they are real, and for me that is enough. And now, since you've patiently stayed with me all the way to this moment, I want to share something from my heart. You are part of this journey too. If you are listening, let me know where you are watching from so I can see how far this little story has traveled. Every comment, every subscription, every single like is not just a number, but an encouragement that keeps me telling these stories of justice, family, and the quiet strength of patience. Thank you for staying until the very end. To me, your presence, even if only for a few minutes of listening, is the greatest gift. It reminds me that in this wide world, none of us are ever truly alone, as long as there is someone willing to listen, to understand, and to walk beside us. Give the master bedroom to us, and you can sleep in the basement tonight. My son said it so lightly, right as he rolled his suitcase through the door. Behind him, my daughter-in-law glided past me in dark sunglasses with that appraising look like someone touring a house she's about to buy. They brought 4 suitcases, a box with an electric cooktop, a few potted plants, and the familiar line, "We'll just stay for a bit. Don't worry." I stood frozen in the living room, the place that used to be the nest for me and Evan, watching them touch and rearrange my late husband's things. My heart went cold, but my lips still held a smile. Under my hem, my fingers gripped the safe key. They thought I was a compliant old woman who would bow my head and accept it. They didn't know I had quietly installed cameras. And the one who would leave this house in shame would not be me. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Claudia Hart, 66, living in a quiet suburb of Asheville, North Carolina. 6 years ago, my husband Evan died of a heart attack while tending the backyard garden. He left me just enough life insurance, plus the savings I'd put away over 30 years working part-time at a fabric shop called Cotton and Thread. I used all of it to buy this house, the first home ever in my name alone. I didn't choose it for luxury. I chose it because it felt like Evan. In late afternoon light, the warm wood tone pours across the living room. The small, tidy kitchen has a hook for the floral apron he once gave me. Every brick, every wall is the result of years I lived carefully and decently. And in 6 years of widowhood, I learned to enjoy being alone without feeling lonely. In the mornings, I walk with a small neighborhood group, 5 women in their 60s and 70s. We talk about everything, new TV shows to the apple pie someone's husband used to love. I learned to use a smartphone, set up WhatsApp, Facebook, then Instagram, where I post photos of the rose, garden out back in bloom. Every 2 weeks, I go to a little salon on Main Street to keep my hair a chestnut brown. The color, Evan said, made me look like autumn smiling. I thought my life had settled back into a calm rhythm. Until that afternoon, when the door opened and Dylan walked in with Harper. Dylan, my only son, 35, used to be gentle and sweet, but life wore that down. After Evan died, he started changing, calling less, visiting less, and whenever he did, it was to borrow money. I could never turn him down. A mother, even knowing her child isn't perfect, keeps believing he's just going through a rough patch. But this time was different. He didn't bring the usual awkwardness. He brought the unnerving ease of someone who had a plan. Harper followed, her heels striking the wood floor with firm, even steps. She didn't look at me like a mother-in-law. She looked at me like an asset to be evaluated. "Oh, Claudia, this house has so much potential," she said, opening doors, glancing at the walls and ceiling, then stopping at the old Tiffany lamp what Evan and I bought on our 30th anniversary trip. "If we switch to LED and change the metal frame, it'll look much brighter." Claudia. She didn't call me Mom, not even Mrs. Hart. Just Claudia, a stranger's name in my own house. I swallowed and smiled. "You must be tired. I'll set up the living room so you can rest a while." "No need," Dylan cut in, voice firm. "We'll take the master. It's bigger and closer to the bathroom. You can stay in the basement for a few days." I heard my own thoughts shout. The basement? The room where Evan kept garden tools cold and damp? But I said nothing. I nodded, the reflex of someone far too used to giving way. That night, after they shut the master bedroom door, I sat in the kitchen, listening only to the vent fan and the slow clink of a spoon in my chamomile tea. I tried not to listen, but I heard Harper's laugh, Dylan's voice. "Yeah, I know. The place is old, but a few updates and it'll sell for a good price. We need to talk her into it, or at least get her to sign a few papers to make things easier later." Then they laughed. I sat still, gripping the cup until the heat was gone. The next morning I went on my walk as usual. Maeve, my closest friend, took one look at me and asked, "You look worn out. What happened?" I told her everything, how Dylan and Harper had suddenly moved in, how they acted like homeowners, and that line about, "You take the basement." Maeve stopped, studied me, then said, "Claudia, that house is yours. You worked your whole life for it. No one has the right to walk in without permission. Don't let kindness blur your judgment." I nodded, but deep down I felt something heavier than fear, the sadness of a mother losing authority over her own life. When I got back, the living room was different. The cream sofa I bought during a spring sale had been pushed to the opposite wall. The floral pillows I loved because they matched my garden roses were tossed in a corner. The wedding photo of Evan and me taken in a field of tulips in Seattle had been taken down and replaced by a gray-black abstract print. "What do you think?" Harper asked brightly. "Much more modern, right?" I looked around the room where Evan and I drank tea every evening. Now it felt cold and unfamiliar. I answered softly, "Yes, it's modern." Harper all but took over the kitchen. She moved all my dishes to the highest shelves, then brought in a flood of organic items, expensive olive oil, cold-pressed juices, imported cheeses arranged like a model condo in a magazine. Whenever I started to cook, she'd appear with a smile. "I've got it, Claudia. You've cooked your whole life. It's time to rest." It sounded caring, but the tone was erasing me. Dylan was different. He lay on the sofa all day, scrolling his phone, sometimes heading out without saying where. When I asked about work, he just said, "Don't worry, I'm waiting on a few calls." But I knew it had been more than 8 months since he left the construction company. I didn't want to keep score, but after 3 weeks my bank balance was dropping fast. Grocery bills doubled and Harper borrowed my card to place online orders. I realized I was paying for things that weren't mine. One evening, standing in my bedroom, I looked out the window. A warm glow from the master bedroom fell across the lawn, and I heard the soft laughter of 2 young people making calculations. I opened my cabinet and took out a small wooden box. Inside were the deed, Evan's will, and old savings books. Everything was still there. I closed the lid, placed my hand on top, and breathed in. In that moment I knew. If I stayed silent, they would take everything. Not just the house, but my self-respect and the rest of my life. The next morning I Went to the electronics store near Walmart and bought 2 mini cameras, thumb-sized, Wi-Fi, viewable on my phone. The clerk kindly showed me how to use them, assuming I wanted to protect against burglars. He didn't know the burglars were already inside. That night, I installed one behind a Mexican ceramic vase in the living room, angled toward the kitchen. I opened my phone and saw a crisp image, catching even the smallest movement. I felt something strange, pain and clarity at once. I told myself, watch first, talk later. I was no longer the shaky woman after Evan died. I'd rebuilt a life once. I could do it again this time to protect what I made with my own 2 hands. Outside, evening settled. Light touched the window frame, washing the wedding photo I had rehung in amber. Evan was still smiling. I whispered, "It's okay, love. I'll keep this house safe." And as the night closed in, the tiny camera began to record. The real story had only just begun. The first camera I placed behind the Mexican vase on the cabinet, right at the living room corner. From there, the thumb-size lens could see almost the entire room, even the kitchen where Harper moved in and out like it was her private domain. I kept the second camera in a drawer, waiting for the right spot. I wasn't in a hurry. I knew this game needed time. On day 1 after installing it, I sat on my bed and opened the app. The screen showed Harper with a tape measure, checking the curtains. She said casually, "These curtains are outdated. We should switch to automatic ones with a remote. It'll look more upscale." Dylan stood beside her, jotting notes in a small notebook, nodding like a tech assistant. "Yeah, the house will definitely look brighter," he said, oblivious to whose house it was. I sat there watching, a chill running down my spine. Every small laugh from Harper, every touch of her hand on the walls and frames, felt like they were peeling the warmth off. This place, layer by layer. From that day, Harper started what she called a kitchen restructuring. I called it something else, erasing me. She moved my things to the highest shelves, places I couldn't reach, even on tiptoe. She called the soft green ceramic bowls Evan bought at a local market outdated in their place, cold, plain white plates. Whenever I walked in to cook, Harper appeared right away, voice sweet but directive. "I'll do it, Claudia. You should rest. You've cooked your whole life. Now I'll take care of you." It sounded polite, but her eyes scanned knives and fridge shelves like an inventory. One morning, I set out to make my usual banana bread. I opened the cabinet and froze flour, eggs, milk, all gone. In their place were cold-pressed juices, imported cheeses, almond milk, and pricey granola. I asked, "Harper, where did you put my things?" She shrugged, smiling lightly. I tidied up. "Old stuff isn't great for your health, Claudia." For the first time ever, I felt like a guest in my own kitchen. The weekly grocery emails kept climbing, from $80 to $100 to $270. I knew I wasn't the one spending like that. But when I asked, Dylan would say, "Don't worry. Harper knows how to balance a budget." One evening I opened the fridge. Amid the fancy cheeses and detox juices sat a bag of bread I'd bought the week before, covered in green mold. I picked it up, stared at the fuzz on the crust, and felt my throat tighten. I set it down and sat at the table where Evan used to read the paper each morning, and cried quietly. Not from hunger, but from being cut out of the picture of my own life. About a week later, I checked the camera again. The feed was clear, Harper on the sofa, phone to her ear. Her voice came through the tiny speaker. "I'm serious. This area's values are rising fast. If we list at the right time, we can get over 300,000. My mother-in-law won't live forever. This house will be ours sooner or later." I saw Dylan walk by and ask, "Lo, what if Mom finds out?" Harper chuckled. "Let me handle it. We just need her to sign a few information updates." I felt my heart pound, not from fear, but awakening. I hit save, time-stamped the clip, and moved it to a special folder. On my table, the note Maeve had me stick up was still there. Record everything. Don't trust promises, trust proof. I numbered each file and wrote a caption. Harper, talking about listing the house June 12th. For the first time in days, I felt strangely calm. That night, sitting by the Tiffany lamp, I thought of Evan. He used to say, "A home holds your spirit, Claudie. Keep it clean, not just with polish, but with self-respect." I looked at the brown leather armchair where he always read the paper, the armrest darkened by 40 years of his hand. I laid my palm there, the leather cool, the memory warm. I knew if Evan were here, he wouldn't let anyone touch this house with that attitude. But I also knew he'd want me to fight wisely, not with rage, but with reason. The next day, I reopened the materials from an elder rights and homeownership community class I'd taken last year. Among the instructors was Talia Chen, a young attorney who spoke clearly and had a smile that made you trust her. I found her card again. The number was still in my wallet. That afternoon I called, "Talia, this is Claudia Hart. We met in the elder rights class. I think I need your advice." Her voice was steady and warm. "Yes, Miss Hart. Could you come to my office tomorrow morning? I'll review your house documents." The next morning I drove Evan's old gray Subaru, nearly 20 years old, downtown to Talia's office. She greeted me with a warm smile and a cup of tea. "Did you bring the house papers?" she asked. I opened my bag and pulled out an old folder. Deed, purchase, contract, insurance receipts, Evan's will. Talia read each page, sometimes jotting notes. When she finished, she looked up and said firmly, "You are the sole legal owner. No one can remove you from this home without your consent, and right now, you haven't signed any power of attorney or transfer documents. That means you retain full control." I nodded, feeling a little lighter, but Talia wasn't done. She added, "However, you need to secure your documents right away. I recommend you photograph everything and give a copy to someone you trust. Also, change your email and bank passwords and check whether anyone has been added as a beneficiary." I wrote down every line. Talia looked at me and asked quietly, "Are they living with you now?" "Yes," I said. "My son and his wife." Her eyes dimmed slightly. "Then I want you to gather more proof of intent to take over texts, calls, recordings. If they stay and show possession or coercion, you can request a lawful eviction order." I asked, "What if they refuse to leave?" Talia said, "You're not alone, Miss Hart. The law protects you, but we need evidence." Driving home, I turned on the radio. "Blue Moon of Kentucky" came on Evan's song whenever he fixed the fence. I smiled. Talia's words lingered. "You're not alone." That afternoon I got home and found Harper taping color samples to the wall. Dylan was browsing real estate sites. Harper turned, smiling. "I'm drafting a plan to redo the living room, Claudia. I want to make this an open space like the model homes in Charlotte." I smiled, hiding my real expression behind my cup of tea. Sounds ambitious. That night, I went to my room and shut the door. On my phone, Harper was still on-screen, tape measure in hand, lips moving, the mic too far to catch it all. I tapped record. From that moment, I understood. I had officially entered the fight to take back my home. Light from the Tiffany lamp reflected across the wall, laying a soft gold on my face. I touched Evan's photo frame and murmured, "Love, I'm keeping my promise. They haven't won." And in the quiet, the house seemed to listen. Only the tiny camera blinked steady, small like the first spark of justice. I didn't need many days to see Harper wasn't just updating the house. She was setting up a deal. That morning, I'd just made chamomile tea when the front door opened. Harper came in with a polished smile. "Claudia, I have a friend dropping by to take a look at a few details just for reference." I glanced at her spotless heels. This wasn't a casual visit. A moment later, the doorbell rang. A young man with gelled hair, crisp white shirt, leather briefcase stepped in. Harper beamed. "This is Colin, a real estate agent, an old classmate. He knows this area well and wants to help estimate the value of Mom's house." My heart went cold. "Mom's house? Not my house." She said estimate like a breeze, but I knew when an agent walks in, they've already considered a sale. I stood in the kitchen doorway, watching through the crack. Harper poured coffee using the commemorative porcelain set Evan gave me for my 40th birthday, a set I never let anyone touch. She set the tray down, turning her back to the camera hidden behind the vase. Colin sat and opened his tablet, voice upbeat. "This place has great potential. With this square footage, if you update the interiors, change the floors, repaint, you're looking at $310,000 to $330,000, depending on timing." Harper tilted her head, sugar sweet. "What if we change the door frames and add automatic shades?" Colin nodded. "Tack on a few thousand and you're set. South Asheville's hot right now, so this is a golden time to list." I heard pen scratching paper. Dylan, seated beside him, asked in a tone so casual it chilled me, "Hey, let's say, the house is still in my mom's name after we renovate. Can we switch ownership after the sale?" Colin hesitated. "Legally, you need the owner's signature. But if the family agrees, the process is quick." Harper cut in. "Oh, she agrees to everything, she just gets mixed up with paperwork. She's not into managing this stuff anymore." They laughed, and a spoon clinked against porcelain metal on china, like a needle pricking my heart. I didn't step out. I sat in my bedroom, watching the live feed, Harper playing dutiful daughter-in-law before the agent, and Dylan, the boy I carried while Evan traveled for work, now nodding like an accomplice. My hands shook so much I set the cup down. But I didn't cry. Tears would only make them stronger. I needed clarity. After nearly an hour, Colin stood, shook Harper's hand, and said, "I'll prep a detailed valuation. With some decluttering and photos, you could list in 2 weeks. Congratulations, you've got a valuable asset." Harper beamed, as if she'd just closed a great deal. The door shut, leaving the smell of coffee mixed with the vanilla room spray Harper liked thick and artificial. I quietly turned off my phone and sat still until my heart settled. From the living room, Harper's voice rose clear and cold. "I'll call the lender about the deposit for the South Asheville place. Good schools. Quiet. Perfect for a family." Dylan mumbled. "What about Mom?" Harper answered, lower but still audible on the mic. "Senior living. I found a place with great reviews, private rooms, quiet. On paper, it looks perfect. She'll adjust." I let out a dry, strangled laugh. "Senior living. That's what they called their plan to push me out, dressed up in pretty words." I took out my phone and exported the video. 3 clips. Harper entertaining the agent, Dylan asking about switching ownership later, and the line about senior living. I sent everything to Talia, with a short note. "Here's proof of intent to take over. They're moving on the first steps." In under 10 minutes, Talia replied, 24-karat evidence. Keep the originals untouched. I'll guide next steps. And Claudia, you're doing everything right." Just 4 lines, but it felt like someone had breathed life back into me. In this fight, I wasn't alone. When night fell, I walked into the living room. Harper and Dylan had gone out to dinner. The house was unusually quiet, only the wall clock ticking. I moved slowly through the room, touching the old things, the Tiffany lamp still casting warm gold, the leather armchair still dented where Evan used to sit. I lifted our wedding photo, the one Harper had removed, and hung it back where it belonged. Evan was still smiling in it, pride in his eyes. I whispered, "Love, I'm keeping my promise. I won't let them turn this home into a cheap commodity." Then, I took a small notebook and wrote, in steady strokes, June 14th. They brought an agent to appraise the house. They discussed selling and a new place in South Asheville. I sat 2 walls away and heard every word. They decided I was invisible. And because of that, I'll make sure they see me in a way they won't expect. I closed the notebook and set it on the coffee table. Outside, a thin moon rose, washing a pale glow over the living room wall. I turned off all the lights except the Tiffany lamp, the lamp that was Evan's, and now stands guard over my honor. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window with a cup of tea gone cold, thinking about everything. About Evan, about the son I once believed was a good man, about the daughter-in-law planning each move. I didn't feel hatred, just a raw emptiness like someone had scooped out my softest part and packed it with ice. I opened the notebook and added one last line. June 14th, I set a 7-day deadline, 7 days to prepare a counterplan. I didn't. I know exactly how everything would play out, but I knew I wouldn't sit still. I would collect, record, and protect every inch of this house of what is mine. Early morning, the first sunlight streamed into the living room. I sat by the window frame, watching tiny dust motes sparkle in the light like millions of floating memories. Outside, Harper's car sounded. I heard her voice carrying on the phone. "Yeah, Colin. Please email the valuation. We want to list next week if my mother-in-law signs quickly." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. In my head, Talia's voice was clear. Don't confront them head-on before it's time. Let them expose themselves. I smiled, smoothed my hair, and stood up. On the table, my wedding photo with Evan caught the sun, shimmering like a reminder. There are things people can buy but never truly own, and this house is one of them. That morning, I woke earlier than usual. Asheville air was a little crisp, dew still clinging to the rose, canes on the porch. I looked at myself in the mirror. The face with wrinkles no longer made me sad. I chose a beige dress in the soft fabric Evan liked and put on the pearl earrings he gave me for our 25th anniversary. In the mirror, the light reflected a woman I had once forgotten, not the gentle old lady they imagined, but Claudia Hart, who worked 30 years and paid for this house down to the last dollar. I brewed coffee the whole bean kind Evan loved, kept in a glass jar. When the aroma filled the kitchen, I knew I was ready. Around 8:30, Dylan and Harper woke up. They had argued in low voices in their room, then came out looking tired. I sat at the table, hands around my coffee cup, voice even, "We need to talk." Dylan frowned slightly, and before he could react, I continued, firmer than even I expected. "I bought this house. I decide who lives here and for how long. Any changes in this house require my consent." As the words landed, the room seemed to pause. Dylan blinked, staring at me like he was trying to recognize whether the woman in front of him was really his mother. "Mom, why are you saying this out of nowhere?" I thought. "You thought I would keep staying silent?" I cut in, eyes on him. "No, Dylan, my silence hasn't meant consent." Harper stepped out, phone in hand, lips tilted in a half-smirk, half-challenge. "Claudia, you must be misremembering. This house was bought with Dad's life insurance, and Dylan should have a share of that. I'm only helping you modernize it." I set my cup down, voice low but precise. "No, Harper. I'm not misremembering. I signed the contract, my name is on the deed, and I've paid every property tax for 6 years. This is my legal asset." I picked up the remote and turned on the TV. The camera clip came up, Colin the real estate agent, voice clear. "The price could reach $310,000 to $330,000 if you list at the right time." I tapped again. Harper's voice came through, sharp. "I'll handle the paperwork. My mother-in-law won't live forever." Senior living sounds good anyway. Senior living echoed through the room like a knife. Dylan whipped toward Harper, face flushing. You said that?" Harper froze, her voice catching. "I was joking." I turned off the TV and faced them. "No need to argue," I said evenly. "I don't need excuses. I only want you to understand one thing. I know everything. Dylan forced a smile. Mom, you recorded us? Why would you do that? I answered plainly. No. I protected my home. I stood and pulled a paper from the envelope I'd placed on the table, the printout from my attorney, Talia Chen. I've retained an attorney, I said. If, 7 days from today, you have not moved out, she will file for eviction and a no trespass order with the court. Harper's eyes widened, her voice harsh. You can't do that. We're family. I nodded. Yes, but family doesn't mean permission to violate boundaries. Family means respect, not exploitation. Dylan lowered his head. I could see him wrestling with embarrassment and anger. Mom, I just wanted to ease your burden. This house needs maintenance, someone to take care of it. I didn't mean I cut in. You let someone else decide everything in my kitchen without me. That's not helping, Dylan, that's taking over. Harper shifted tactics fast. She inhaled, softened her tone, eyes glossing like she might cry. I only want you to have a better life. I'm afraid you're lonely. Things here are old, updating them would make you happier. I meant no harm. I looked at her for a long moment. I had been a woman who knew how to cry to diffuse conflict. I recognized purposeful tears. Harper, I said slowly, if you truly wanted to help, you would ask before acting. You would respect what belongs to someone else. If you only want to replace, that isn't help, that's erasure. Harper lowered her gaze, silent. Dylan sat down, fingers laced, lips tight. I exhaled light but steady. From now on, there are 3 rules in this house. 1, respect. No one changes anything without my approval. 2, ask. Every expense, every plan must be transparent. 3, share costs. I am not a bank and not a sponsor. If you can't meet these 3, then you leave. The room went still. I could hear the clock ticking, counting the seconds stretching between us. Dylan lifted his head, voice unsteady. Mom, I know I was wrong. Don't be so tense. Can I give you a hug? I stepped back. No, Dylan. Gestures don't replace responsibility. You don't need to hug me, you need to understand me. He froze, hands suspended. His eyes glistened, then dropped. I felt no triumph, only a bone-deep sadness, a quiet space between 2 generations. I turned to Harper, gentler but firm. I'm giving you 7 days. I'm not throwing you out. I'm giving you time to choose, comply or leave. Harper looked away, lips pressed tight. Dylan started to speak, then didn't. I cleared my cup and carried it to the sink. Under the sound of running water, I felt a settled calm. In the 6 years since Evan died, this was the first time I truly felt in control of my life. At noon, I sat on the porch and texted Maeve. I told them, 7 days. If anything happens, can you stand as my witness? She replied immediately, of course. And Claudia? You came back today, not the quiet one anymore. I set the phone down and looked at the roses. Sunlight hit the red petals, gleaming like jewels. I thought maybe Evan was watching me from somewhere, smiling. In the afternoon, Harper moved through the kitchen, cleaning in silence. Dylan went to the yard to make a call, voice low. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. I had a plan, evidence, an attorney, a friend beside me, and, more than anything, put myself back. Night fell, the house quiet. I sat before the wedding photo, the Tiffany lamp warming Evan's face. I whispered, "Do you see, love?" I finally stood up. I spoke again in my own voice. I smiled slightly, sure of one thing more than ever. I'm no longer the compliant Claudia they knew. I am the mother, the woman no one can erase from this house. That night, wind pushed hard along the porch, the damp smell of earth slipping through the doorframe after rain. I was about to turn off the light when I heard a spoon hit a porcelain cup in the living room. A small sound, but in a silent house it felt like the opening cue for another battle. I stopped, kept the lights off. Through the crack of my door, pale yellow spilled from the living room where Harper and Dylan sat facing each other. I quietly opened the camera app on my phone and switched to record. Every word came through as if the walls themselves were carrying it to me. "You're too weak, Dylan," Harper hissed. "I told you if you don't act decisively, your mother will never leave. She's playing the victim to gain sympathy." Dylan answered, tired. "You're pushing this too far. I just wanted to stay for a while. You turned it into a whole plan to take the house. Do you know Mom already found a lawyer?" Harper lowered her voice, but the mic still caught it. "You think I don't know? It's just a scare tactic. An old woman in her 60s, hands shaking when she signs. What can she do?" I clenched my phone, heart pounding, but I still didn't step out. Not out of fear, but because I needed them to say it all, so this house, its walls, would remember everything. Next morning, when they went out, I installed the second camera in the hallway above the landscape painting. From there, it could see my bedroom door, the stairs, and the kitchen. Every movement saved to the cloud, second by second. That afternoon, I replayed the footage. What I saw tightened my throat. Harper and Dylan were in the living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes. They folded my coats, the knit scarves I made, even Evan's porcelain set. Each item went into boxes labeled donation. Harper said breezily, "Just pack first. She never uses this stuff anyway." Dylan stayed quiet, head down as he closed the lids. Watching that on my screen, I felt something in me fracture. Not because they took things, but because they acted as if I had already disappeared. The next day at noon, Harper sat on the porch making a call. I sat in the kitchen, quietly listening through the camera. "Hi, Miss Ruth," Harper said sweetly. "Remember me? I mentioned my mother-in-law the other day. I think you should come talk to her. She seems confused, not very coherent." I knew immediately she meant Ruth Navarro. A mediator Harper had mentioned, someone who handles families with elders needing guardianship. Harper added, voice dropping, "If possible, could you also pick up a power of attorney so we can help manage her finances? Tomorrow afternoon?" I set down my teacup, my chest sinking. So after failing with the agent, they chose to attack my capacity. The following afternoon, Ruth arrived, a woman around 50, neat curls, half-rimmed glasses, carrying a large leather bag. Harper welcomed her warmly, as if hosting a consultation in her own home. I poured coffee, set it gently on the table. "Please," I said, calm. Ruth smiled, but her eyes scanned the house like an appraisal. "Thank you. I just want to chat a little. Your son and his wife said you've had trouble managing your assets lately, is that right?" I glanced at Harper, who lowered her head in a worried pose. Dylan sat silent. I took a sip and said, "No. I'm lucid enough to know who was in my home and who tried to change the locks without asking." Ruth paused, then kept her smile. "I understand. Sometimes a financial power of attorney can reduce stress. At this age, paperwork mistakes can cause issues." I opened my bag and pulled the envelope I'd prepared. Inside was a letter from my family doctor, Dr. Simmons, who examined me last week. "This is my capacity statement," I said, sliding it to Ruth. "My doctor confirms I'm fully competent, memory intact, with no signs of cognitive decline." Ruth read a few lines, then nodded slowly. "I see." Her initial confidence faded. Harper jumped in, trying to recover. "Miss Ruth, I only meant she should have support, not that we doubt her," Dylan added. "We just want to protect Mom." I looked at them both, voice quiet but firm. "If you want to protect, start by not lying." No one spoke. Ruth's eyes shifted. She stood and said neutrally, "I understand. Perhaps this isn't the right time." Keep my card in case you want to talk further." I smiled and accepted the card like a piece of evidence. "Thank you, Ruth. I'll keep it safe." She left in silence. Harper looked at me, trying to appear composed, but her hand trembled around the cup. Dylan avoided my eyes and muttered, "Mom, you misunderstood." I didn't answer. I just tapped stop recording in my pocket, every word of the conversation saved. That night I sent the audio file to Talia with a note. They brought in a mediator, mentioned financial power of attorney. "I have evidence." "In under 10 minutes, Talia replied. "Perfect, Claudia. You're doing exactly right. Keep the original files. Tomorrow I'll send the notice to terminate their stay. Be ready." I leaned back and closed my eyes. The house was quiet. I could hear light rain on the roof, steady as the heartbeat of the one who's gone, Evan, who always believed every home has a soul. Next morning, Maeve arrived in a jean jacket with a big tote. "What's next, Claudie?" she asked, eyes tender and encouraging. I opened the cabinet and pointed to the boxes labeled donation. "Relabel everything. I won't let even one of Evan's scarves be stamped as charity." Have you ever seen someone try to redefine an elder's capacity? In this part, what angered you most, the donation boxes or the POA suggestion? Tell me in the comments, so this story can become a shared voice. We worked all morning. Maeve replaced labels. I made an inventory. The important things, deed, insurance papers, savings. I put into the auxiliary safe in my bedroom. Maeve kept the spare key. We locked it and carried the file bag to her house 3 blocks away. "Safer with me," she said. Talia said the same. "And Claudie, don't forget to change every password." I nodded. That evening I changed every bank, email, and the smart lock on the front door. Each time the keypad lit, it felt like I was closing another door they'd opened without permission. Late at night, I printed the termination notice under North Carolina law from Talia's email. I read every line carefully, then added a handwritten closing. "The violators must vacate within 7 days from the date signed. If not, the owner reserves the right to request law enforcement intervention." I signed at the bottom, my handwriting shaky but clear. Then I taped the notice discreetly in the kitchen, just under the cabinet right where Harper opened every morning for her juice glass. I stepped back, watched the white paper glow under the warm light, and felt like I'd hung a protective charm. Outside, wind nudged the curtains. The house was silent, but I knew its walls had heard everything, heard their plans, heard my words, and now stood with me. I turned off the light and whispered, "Listen, Evan. Hear me, I finally learned how to protect myself." In the dark, the porch wind sounded like an answer, warm and steady. On the 3rd morning after I posted the notice in the kitchen, the house was strangely quiet. No yoga music from Harper, fewer footsteps from Dylan. I thought they were preparing to leave quietly until Harper walked into the kitchen, resting a hand lightly on her stomach, her face a mix of stress and calculation. "Claudia," she called, softer and slower than usual. I need to talk to you." I was wiping the table and looked up. Morning light crossed her face pale, trying to appear fragile. "I'm pregnant," Harper said, eyes down, voice barely above a breath. I paused half a beat. The words dropped into the kitchen like a pebble into a deep well, quiet but seismic. I set the cloth down and drew a long breath. "Are you sure?" I asked. She nodded, fingers laced over her belly like cradling a life already here. "Just 6 weeks. We haven't told anyone. I don't want to make things worse. I just hope you understand we can't move out now." Harper lifted her head. Her voice shook, but her eyes brightened like someone who'd found a winning card. "For the baby, Mom. You were a mother, you understand. I just need a stable place, at least until I give birth. After that, we'll go." I went quiet. In my mind flashed the young Evan when I was pregnant with Dylan, how he prepared everything, from the little crib to the body pillow. I know the fear and tenderness of a mother-to-be, but I also remembered Talia's words very clearly from our consult last week. Pregnancy doesn't create residency rights or property ownership, Claudia. Don't let feelings derail judgment. Good hearts can be exploited through their kindest instincts. I poured water, my hand still faintly shaking. Harper, I said softly, I bless the baby, but that doesn't change the boundary. This is my home, and I was clear about the 7-day deadline. I won't take it back. Harper stared at me for a few seconds, then her look shifted to wounded anger. You're heartless, she snapped. You're throwing your pregnant daughter-in-law out on the street? What kind of mother-in-law does that? I breathed in. I'm not throwing anyone out. I'm asking you to leave a place you tried to take. There's a difference, Harper. Dylan came down the stairs, face confused. Harper, come on, he said quietly. Don't do this. Be quiet, she shot back. Don't you see she has no heart? She only cares about the house, not blood. Dylan stayed silent, avoiding my eyes. I knew my son was stuck in the middle, but this time I didn't try to rescue the moment. I looked straight at Harper. Don't use the baby as a shield to justify crossing boundaries, Harper. A good mother starts with honesty, not manipulation. The air turned heavy. Harper opened her mouth to speak, then didn't. I turned, opened the drawer, and pulled out the paper I had prepared. This is the final notice, I said, setting it on the table. 7 days starting today. I wrote it by hand and signed it clearly. When the deadline comes, I'll proceed under the law. Harper looked at the paper like it was a sentence. Dylan lowered his head, lips pressed tight. I folded the dishcloth, hung it back on the hook, and left the kitchen without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock tick in the dark. Outside, wind hissed softly through the trees. I thought of Evan, his voice in hard times, always low and steady. Keep the house, keep your honor. Don't let anyone decide for you what home is. I turned to the side and touched the wedding photo on the nightstand. Evan, I whispered, I'm doing what you would do, right? Tears fell onto the pillow, and I didn't wipe them away. Some tears don't belong to weakness, they belong to someone reclaiming ownership. Before sunrise, I got up. Pale blue light seeped through the curtains like thin mist. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and plugged in the external drive. Every video file, audio clip, journal entry, and photo of the notice in the kitchen, I gathered them into one folder and named it Proof 7 Days. I sent that package to Talia with a message. This is all the evidence I have. I want everything clear before the deadline. 10 minutes later, she replied, Very good, Claudia. I have everything. You're on the right track. Stay calm, I'll monitor the legal side. Reading that line eased me. In the chaos of betrayal, at least one person believed me, and we had a clear plan. Near noon, Maeve stopped by with 2 smoothies and a soft smile. Walk? She asked. It's a beautiful day. We went along the little neighborhood road. Maple leaves drifted down, cool air brushing like a soothing hand. I told her briefly that Harper was pregnant, my voice dropping. Maeve listened, then laid a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, she said. Pregnancy isn't a free pass. If you cave now, you'll lose everything later. Hey, try the 4-7-8 breathing. Talia taught me during that. Mess with my brother. Inhale 4, hold 7, exhale 8. Keep doing it settles the nerves. I followed. Inhale 4 beats, hold 7, exhale 8. Wind slipped through my hair, and someone's rose garden sent a faint scent. My chest loosened, like a knot finally untied. That afternoon the kitchen was quiet. Harper and Dylan had gone out. I stood in the familiar room, light falling across the old wooden counter. On the shelf sat Evan's tea set, the one Harper used to serve the agent, without asking me. I took a soft cloth and wiped each piece, carefully, like touching a memory. Every tiny scratch in the porcelain was a slice of time mornings at the window, him with the paper, me with the kettle. I put the set back exactly where it used to be, a small ritual of taking ownership back. My hands were steady now. I knew exactly what I was doing. I wasn't fighting to push someone out. I was protecting the place that once held the heart of a marriage, of youth, of memory. That evening, I wrote in my journal, June 17th, Harper says she's pregnant. I believe it, but I won't let it blind me. I am not against a child, I am against deceit. Evan, you taught me that kindness without boundaries becomes a trap. I understand that now. I closed the book and listened to the wind threading through the eaves. Somewhere in the house, the walls stayed silent, but I felt them watching, witnessing each step as I reclaimed my place. Outside, a light rain began. I turned off the lamp and stood at the window. In the dark, I spoke quietly, not for anyone else but for myself. Keep the house. Keep your honor. Keep your calm. Then I left the kitchen, the scent of coffee, and the ticking clock behind me, the familiar breath of a home waking from a long sleep of silence. Friday evening, the last sunlight pooled on the porch like slow honey. The wall clock struck 6, one beat at a time. I stood in the living room and heard a car stop at the curb. Talia texted, "I'm here, waiting in the car. Officer Jackson is with me, per schedule, just in case." I looked through the window, a silver SUV at the curb. Talia stepped out in a white shirt and gray vest, composed. Next to her stood a uniformed officer with a notebook. They wouldn't come in unless needed. I gave a slight nod through the glass, letting them know I was fine. Inside, the hard scrape of a suitcase dragged across the floor. Harper was closing the last box. Her perfume mixed with cardboard dust, thickening the air. Dylan stood by the stairs, hands in his pockets, eyes down. "We're not done," Harper said without looking up. "Can you give us a few more hours?" "I already gave 2 weeks," I answered even. "It's 6 o'clock the deadline," I stated in writing. "I'm not throwing you out. I'm following the law." She flipped her hair and curled a thin smile. "Law, law, always the law. In the end, what do you have besides this house?" I looked straight at her, not angry, just calm. "I have the truth and legal records." "You have words." Dylan stepped closer, voice small but edged. "Mom, I don't want drama, but if you're this rigid, I'll tell Dad's side of the family. Everyone will hear how you treated your son and daughter-in-law." I exhaled not from fear, but from sadness that he still believed truth could be drowned out by noise. "Tell whoever you want," I said slowly. "But I have evidence, video, audio, and my attorney's statement. I don't need threats. I have facts." Silence fell. The clock ticked again, counting the last seconds of their hold on my home. Harper gripped the suitcase handle, eyes cold. "I hope this empty house makes you happy," she said sweetly enough to sting. "It isn't empty," I said softly. "It's clean." She turned and rolled the suitcase out the door. Dylan followed, stopped for a second, and looked back at me. His eyes swirled with regret and pride. I couldn't read it, so I said one last thing. "Dylan, I hope you find your self-respect before you try to find your mother again." The door clicked shut. That small clack was the first sound of freedom. The house was so quiet I could hear wind nudging the window frames. I stood in the living room as the last light spread gold across the floor like a fresh cover. No footsteps, no synthetic essential oils smothering Evan's coffee, no appraising eyes, only relief. I sat on the sofa, felt the cushion give. Beside me lay the embroidered floral pillow I thought Harper had thrown out. I smoothed the fabric and whispered, "This house is mine again." My voice was small, but in that quiet space, it felt like a declaration. Half an hour later, a knock. Maeve walked in with a paper bag and a bright grin. "Mission accomplished?" I laughed. "Completely. They left at 6 o'clock sharp. Then it's time to celebrate." She lifted the bag. butter-filled, waffles, and fresh ground coffee. I'm brewing. We nudged the table back, opened the windows to let the last of the evening light in. Air flowed free. Dust shimmered like golden threads. Maeve laid out the food. I remember the first time I came here. Your house smelled like almond and linen. Lately it was nothing but sharp peppermint oil. I chuckled and poured coffee. We're back now. Almond, coffee, and silence. She nodded. Silence is a luxury too, Claudie. I opened the front door wide. The whole block glowed in sunset. Sparrows hopped along the fence. Neighbors laughed in their yards, and a far-off radio carried the evening news. Life slipped back into its rhythm, no longer occupied, no longer disturbed. Inside me, there was an odd, pleasant emptiness, not sadness, space to breathe. I texted Talia. They're gone. No incident. Thank you for everything. She replied almost instantly. I'm happy for you, Claudia. Watch the next few weeks. They might come back to demand items or stir trouble. If anything happens, call me or the police. I sent a thumbs up and set the phone down. That night, I put the house back in order. I started with the kitchen where it all began. I removed the spice jars Harper bought, dumped the spoiled turmeric, and reset the shelves my way. I grabbed a fresh set of sheets and changed the living room sofa. As the clean fabric slid into place, it felt like wiping away weeks of strain. The washer hummed, water flowed like a soothing soundtrack. On the shelf, I put on jazz Dave Brubeck's Take 5, Evan's favorite. The warm saxophone notes drifted through the rooms like a greeting from the past. I smiled. Harper was right about one thing. The house was empty, but empty clean, empty for real life to come back, not the pretend kind. Around 8, Maeve headed home. Before leaving, she hugged me light but warm. I'm proud of you, Claudie. Not because you beat them, but because I came back to yourself. I smiled. Me too. For the first time in years, I feel at peace inside my own walls. The door closed. I dimmed the lights, leaving only the Tiffany lamp's soft gold. The house rested, bathed in music. I sat at the dining table, pulled out a blank page, and wrote the first lines of my boundary list. 1. No one enters my home without my consent. 2. No one speaks for me, signs for me, or protects me by stripping my rights. 3. Kindness can be a gift, but kindness needs a fence. 4. Everything in this house holds a memory. If you touch it with respect. 5. If one day I grow weak, remember, I still have a voice and I will use it. I read it over and felt calm. This paper wasn't for Harper or Dylan. It was for my future self in case I ever forgot that I have the right to say no. I stuck it on the fridge between 2 photos, one of Evan and me at our 30th anniversary, and one Maeve took of us laughing on the porch. The light caught the ink, making the words glow. I sat on the sofa, closed my eyes, and listened to the wind in the curtains. There was no fear left in this house, only warmth, coffee, and the jazz fading down. I spoke softly, like closing a long chapter. Welcome home, Claudia. And in that moment, I knew. Sometimes the biggest win isn't keeping a roof, it's finding yourself inside it. I thought after that Friday afternoon, everything would be quiet. I was wrong. The second storm didn't come through the front door, it came through familiar phones. Monday morning, while I was watering roses on the porch, the phone rang. The screen read, Aunt Nora. Evan's cousin, who cried in my arms at the funeral, who once said, "You're the best part of Evan that remains." "Claudia, what is going on?" Her voice was rough, irritated. "Dylan called me last night. Harper's pregnant and you kicked them out? How could you?" I took a breath, kept steady. "Aunt Nora, it's not that. Simple. No need to explain." She cut in. "A good mother knows how to sacrifice. You live alone in a big house, why not show some mercy?" I gripped the phone. Morning sun still lit the dew on the roses, but inside my sky dropped another floor. "Aunt," I said softly, "sacrifice only means something when it isn't being exploited." On the other end, silence. Then the line went dead. Soon after, the phone rang again. Cousin Jeff. He once stayed in my house 2 months after his divorce. Now his tone was half scolding, half sighing. "Hey, I heard from Dylan you're tense. Maybe give them another chance. Harper's about to be a mom." "Jeff," I asked, "have you listened to me at all? Or only to him?" He hesitated, then offered one line. "You're old, don't end up alone. Forgive." I hung up and set the phone on the table. For a moment, I heard my own blood in my ears. Not anger, hurt. People who once ate at my table and heard my stories. All about Evan now turned away after one call from Dylan. By noon, another call. Evan's old friend, Clarence. "Claudia, I heard you lost your temper and want to take your own son to court. Is that true?" "I'm not suing. I'm protecting my property. But that house is where Evan lived. Aren't you afraid people will say you forgot what you owe him?" I let out a small, dry laugh. "If Evan heard that, he'd crack up, Clarence. He taught me to keep what we built, not hand it to someone who disrespects it." Silence for a few seconds. Then he hung up. I sat and watched the screen light and dim. Each call was an accusation carried like an arrow, sent by people I once trusted. That afternoon, Maeve found me sitting on the porch, phone face down. "More calls?" she asked, handing me iced tea. "Yeah. Everyone has an opinion about a good mother. They forget to ask whether any good child makes his mother change the locks." Maeve sat, studied me, and said, softly, "Claudie, stop picking up. The ones who get you don't need your defense. The ones who don't, you could talk a lifetime and it won't matter." I nodded. She was right. That night, I silenced the phone. For the first time in years, I allowed myself not to hear everything. But not everyone called to accuse me. Near midnight, a text from Dylan lit the screen. I hesitated, then opened it. "When you're truly old, don't come to me." I read it again and again, my heart stinging but no longer collapsing. I typed back, "I don't need your care. I need respect, the very thing you didn't give." I hit send and took a long breath. Next morning, as I was making coffee, a video call came in. The name read, "Piper Hart, my brother's daughter, Marcus Jr.'s girl." "Auntie." Her voice was clear but trembling a little. "They're trashing you on Facebook, saying you're cold to Dylan. But I don't believe it. I know you're not like that." I smiled, eyes wet. "Thank you, Piper. Do you have proof?" she asked quietly, leaning toward the camera. I nodded. "I do. I kept everything. Here." I shared a short clip. Harper talking about senior living and listing the house. Piper went quiet, then said firmly, "I'll tell Dad." "Don't worry, you're not alone." The call ended, but my heart brightened a shade. In all that noise, someone still believed in the light of truth. That afternoon, Marcus, my brother, called. His voice was low and measured. "You holding up, Claudie?" "Mostly." "You?" "I heard Dylan's side, but I know him. He's impulsive and his wife eggs him on. Your boy, you know how he is." I paused, then said, "I do, but knowing doesn't mean accepting." Marcus sighed, long and airy, like wind in old trees through the phone. "I'm proud of you. Stand firm. And Evan, if he were alive, I believe he'd stand beside you." This time, I cried for real, not from pain, but from being understood. After that call, I opened an old photo album on my computer. Pictures of Dylan as a kid, brown hair, clutching a chicken drumstick bigger than his wrist, smiling bright. I scrolled a 10th birthday, graduation, a shot of him hugging Evan after college. And then the latest, Dylan next to Harper, both staring at the laptop the day we talked about fixing the house. I looked at his face. The features were still my son's, but the eyes were different. Part of me wanted to blame Harper, but another part knew this betrayal had both their names on it. I closed the album, my heart lighter. Maybe for the first time, I wasn't trying to fix the memory, I was simply accepting it. That night, under warm lamplight, I set up an easel in the living room. I hadn't painted since Evan died. Tonight, I needed to do something just for me. I mixed colors and painted the horizon behind the Blue Ridge, the route Evan and I drove every fall. Layer by layer, blue settled over. Soft violet. When I finished, I signed the lower right corner, C.H. 2 simple letters, but I had never written them for myself before. Every past painting was signed Claudia and Evan. I studied the canvas a long while, calm. Maybe this is how I close a chapter, not by erasing it, but by painting a new one over the top. That night, I slept straight through with no dreams. No doors slamming, no strange footsteps, just steady breathing and a hint of lavender in the air. The next morning, I made coffee and stepped onto the porch. Gentle sunlight lay over the rose garden in bloom. The flowers bent under the night's dew, so fresh it was as if they'd never known a storm. I took a photo, posted it on Instagram, and wrote, "At last, what needed to leave has left. The roses still bloom." Within minutes, the morning walking group sent a flood of hearts with little comments. "So beautiful, Claudie. You're making me want to plant roses today. Your house looks bright again." I smiled, took a sip of coffee, and felt as warm as the first light of day. The storm passed, and I'm still here, whole, clear, and free. Tuesday afternoon, while I was sweeping leaves in the yard, a silver sedan eased to a stop at the gate. I recognized it right away, the familiar plate, the familiar soft thud of the car door. Dylan got out first, shirt wrinkled, face tired. Harper followed, her belly showing more now. In the back seat, I saw Aunt Nora, blue fedora tilted to one side, eyes sharp like a freshly honed blade. I stood still, broom in hand, wind tipping the rose canes behind me. Harper spoke first, her voice part apology, part rehearsal. "Claudia, I'm sorry. We were really wrong. I know you're angry, but we have nowhere to go. The temporary place we rented is dirty and cramped, and I'm pregnant." She set her hand on her belly, a slow, calculated move. Dylan stared at the ground, silent like a boy forced to apologize without knowing why. I nodded slightly but said nothing. Harper took one more step, eyes shimmering. "We're just asking to stay a few days, until we find another place. Really? We only need a few weeks." I set the broom down, took a long breath, then lifted my hand to my chest. "Harper," I said, "I understand there's a life here that needs protecting." I gestured lightly toward her belly. "But here, I set my hand over my heart. There's someone else who needs protecting, and that person is me." Harper blinked, lips pressing together. Aunt Nora cleared her throat and stepped forward, voice tight and commanding, "Claudia, I know you're angry, but have you no humanity left? That's your own son, your blood." I turned to her, calm. "Aunt Nora, humanity doesn't mean letting people trample your boundaries. I learned that at too high a price." She rolled her eyes and jabbed, "You're old, don't be so bitter." I smiled. Age isn't a reason to lose boundaries. It's the reason to guard them even more. I invited them into the living room. The air was tight as a freshly cranked string. I set down a tea tray. A soft cinnamon rose scent lifted through the room. Dylan glanced around the house, looked the same, only neater, brighter. "Before you go on," I began, "I need to be clear. If you truly want to stay temporarily, I can only accept on non-negotiable conditions." Harper and Aunt Nora exchanged a look. Dylan frowned. I listed them slowly. 1. Respect no meddling, no changes, no touching my things. 2. Share household costs clearly. I don't support other adults. 3. A specific time frame, no open-ended stays. And last, if you truly want to stay, you sign a temporary lodging agreement with proper notarization. If any of these are missing, I refuse. Silence fell. Aunt Nora gave a short, scornful laugh. Heavens! Do you think your home is a law firm? Papers and contracts with your own son? Claudia, bitterness is swallowing your heart. I answered evenly, no. I'm letting reason protect my heart. Harper shifted tone quickly, softer, almost trembling. I don't want to sign anything. I just want to rest. I'm exhausted. The doctor said I should avoid stress. She laid a hand on her belly and exhaled. If you won't let us stay, then could you lend us money? We'll find another place. Just a small amount, please. I looked at her a long time. All right, but I need a repayment plan, a clear due date, and signatures from both of you. Harper faltered and glanced at Dylan. He avoided my eyes. Mom, we don't know exactly yet. Once things settle, we'll send it back. So there is no plan, I concluded, quiet but cool. Then my answer is no. Aunt Nora sprang up, louder. Claudia, who have you become? If Evan were alive, he'd be heartbroken. You're turning your son away and shutting the door on family? I met her gaze, steady. If Evan were alive, Aunt, he would understand. He taught me that loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. The air thickened. Harper stood, voice shaky but frosty. I get it. You win. I hope this spotless house makes you happy. It sounded like a rerun of last time, except this time it didn't hurt. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. Afternoon light poured in, warm and straight. I don't need to win, Harper. I need peace. The door stays open, but not to lies. Dylan looked up, a flicker of shame passing through his eyes, then lowered his head and pulled the suitcase. Aunt Nora shot me one last glare, and they all left. The door closed. The sound of wheels on the road faded, and then was gone. I stood for a while. The room was still, holding only the scent of cinnamon rose tea and pale light on the wall. I sat at the table, opened my notebook, and wrote a few lines. June 22nd. Dylan came back with Harper and Aunt Nora. They said sorry, they wanted to stay, then borrow money. I refused warmly but firmly. I'm not angry anymore, I just won't let them cross my boundaries again. I signed my name, then scanned the entire meeting record with timestamps. I filed it carefully in a folder labeled Home Legal. Caution not from fear, but from learning to keep proof for my self-respect. That night, Maeve called. Done, Claudie? Done, I laughed. That chapter's closed. Then let's see a movie tonight. I booked seats at the little theater on Main. Classic film, jazz score fits your mood. I chuckled and said yes. The tiny theater had maybe 20 seats, lights soft and low. The film was Roman Holiday. I sat in the middle, sipped soda, and listened to Audrey Hepburn laugh on screen. It felt strange, like youth had returned, but this time without the fear someone would snatch it away. When we left, night air lifted my hair, and vanilla drifted over from the bakery nearby. Maeve bought 2 crisp waffles and handed me one. Remember this smell? Evan loved these. I nodded, smiling. He did. But now it doesn't feel sad anymore. We walked and laughed, our shadows long on the lit sidewalk. Back home, I opened the door and turned on the kitchen light. The air was warm, touched with new vanilla from the bag. I set it on the table and poured a glass of warm milk. I sat and wrote in my journal, evening of June 22nd. They returned with apologies that smelled like a script. I listened, didn't soften. I opened the door, didn't let hatred in, but didn't let deceit stay. Love is respecting boundaries, not breaking them in the name of family. I closed the book and looked around the house. Everything was intact, not just the things, but the peace. I turned off the light, let the vanilla scent drift through the air, and smiled. Freedom has its own fragrance. Tonight, it's sweet. Saturday morning, I was watering plants when the doorbell rang, 3 short, urgent chimes. Not the mail carrier, not Maeve's knock. I cracked the door, and my heart paused. A young woman stood there, hair in a bun, tired but kind face. In her arms, a baby boy wrapped in a soft beige blanket. The faint smell of milk, powder, and newborn skin slipped into the space between us. "Mrs. Claudia?" Her voice shook, small as a breath. "I'm Harper's cousin. She asked me to bring baby Rowan to see you." I looked at the baby. Fine brown hair like silk threads, round cheeks, tiny hand loosely curled. He gave a small sound so faint, and somehow it felt like I'd just heard my own heart melt. "How many weeks?" I asked, my voice rough. "Just over 3 weeks. Harper says he's healthy, but she's not ready to call you. She just wanted you to see him for a moment." She swayed the baby gently. A light breeze carried warm milk scent and the damp green of the yard. My heart tilted. I thought I'd locked every emotional door after so many. Hurts. But standing there, looking at a brand new, guiltless life, I understood compassion hadn't vanished. It was simply learning not to be used. I drew a breath. Talia's words sounded clear in my head, as if she stood beside me. "Claudia, don't let a newborn become a bargaining chip. Love for your grandchild is different from letting his parents keep crossing lines." I nodded slightly, then spoke slowly. "Thank you for bringing him. Tell Harper and Dylan I bless Rowan. I hope he grows strong and is loved in the right way." The young woman blinked. "Would you like to hold him for a moment?" I looked at the child one last time. My whole body wanted to step forward, but I stopped. "Not today," I said with a gentle smile. "When things have healed, when the adults respect each other, I'll be the first to open the door." She nodded, eyes wet. "I understand. I'll tell her." I brushed the edge of the blanket, not his skin, leaving only a trace of cord, of warmth at my fingertip. "Welcome to the world, Rowan," I whispered. "May you grow up to love without fearing boundaries." Then I closed the door softly. The stroller wheels rolled away over the stone path, folding into the hush of wind in the trees. I stood still a long time, until my heartbeat steadied. Once the door was shut, tears came slow and heavy. I cried not from regret, but to say goodbye to an illusion that love can last forever if we keep sacrificing without limits. I sat, wiped my face, and felt hollow but quietly lighter. A while later, Maeve arrived. Seeing me, she asked nothing, just opened her arms and held me tight. "You didn't reject the baby," she said, warm and low. "You rejected the pattern of abuse. Those are 2 different things." I rested my head on her shoulder and laughed through tears. "You know, Maeve, for the first time in my life, saying no feels warm." She squeezed my hand and murmured, "Because it's a no, from someone who knows her worth." That afternoon, I opened the storage room and looked at the stack of boxes still labeled donation. The things Harper once marked to clear space for their future, now I chose to make it real. I loaded each box into Maeve's car. Inside were clothes, knit scarves, and a few small ceramics. There was no sense of loss, only release. We drove to the church on Lexington, where they run a program for new arrivals in town. The coordinator accepted the items, bowing thanks again and again. I smiled back and watched my things go into storage, not as seized property, but as gifts in the right place. On the way home, Maeve cracked the window. Pine and cinnamon drifted in. It felt like my house had been cleansed. That week, I returned to art class. When I hung the Blue Ridge piece on the easel, the instructor, Mrs. Lorna, paused for a long time. "This one has a very true calm, Claudia," she said. "Not the kind that comes from fear, the kind that comes from having weathered a storm." I smiled, relieved. Maybe I learned to paint with breath instead of memory. Mrs. Lorna nodded. "And that breath is telling me you've come back to yourself." The room went quiet for a few seconds, then soft clapping. I stood before the canvas, looking at the layered blue-violet ridges, gentle, distant, and stubborn. I saw myself there. That night at home, I opened a drawer and took out stationery. I hadn't handwritten a letter in years, but today I wanted to write to my 30-year-ago self, the woman who feared saying no, who thought silence was kindness. I wrote, slow and steady, "Dear 37-year-old Claudia, don't be afraid to say no. Refusal doesn't kill love. It only removes those who loved you for their benefit. When you say no, you're saying yes to respect, to the peace you'll find later. Don't forget you're strong not because you don't hurt, but because you can. Stand inside the hurt and refuse to let it define you." I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and wrote on the front, "To myself, who once mistook silence for virtue." Then I placed it in the wooden box with our wedding photo. That night I decided to make waffles, the dish I used to make only for guests. This time, I made it just for me. I mixed batter, cracked eggs, dusted in cinnamon and vanilla. The mixer hummed. Warm scent filled the kitchen. I ladled batter onto the iron and listened to the happy little sizzle. When the first batch was done, I plated it and drizzled honey. Crisp golden edges, soft center, gentle sweetness. I took a bite and closed my eyes. So this is what freedom tastes like: simple, warm, and delicious without needing anyone to share it. I took a photo and posted it in the Cooking for One group I joined a few weeks ago. Short caption, "Cinnamon Honey Waffles, a recipe for evenings alone but not lonely." Hearts rolled in, and a few comments popped up. "Looks so cozy. Miss Claudia, can we have the recipe? Not lonely, I love that." I smiled and typed back, "I'll post the recipe in the morning." Everyone deserves a batch made just for themselves. When everything was tidy, I turned off the lights and went to the bedroom. Night air slipped through the curtains. Vanilla and honey lingered in the room. I lay down, warm under the covers, body loose. For the first time in ages, I could feel the weight of sleep like a smooth river stone resting in a stream, cool, round, and calm. Right before I drifted off, I said quietly in my heart, "Thank you, Evan. I kept the house." More than that, I kept myself. And that night, for the first time in years, I slept deeply until dawn, in a home that held only truth, kindness, and the scent of fresh waffles. Time moved like still water. 3 months, then 6, no drama, no raised voices, just morning birds and the smell of coffee in the kitchen. I realized peace doesn't arrive all at once. It's built day by day. I set a new rhythm for myself. Monday mornings, gentle yoga at the community center where I practiced deep breathing, opening my chest, and letting go of what I can't control. Wednesdays, I tended the roses, trimming each cane, calling each bush by an old friend's name: Eleanor, Constance, Juliet. Friday afternoons, I went to Pack Library downtown for the seniors' book club. We read The Housekeeper and the Professor, then The Secret Garden, then Educated. Each book was a small mirror held up to my cracks, and instead of fear, I learned to look at them with compassion. Sometimes Dylan still appeared not directly, but through texts he sent via my brother, Marcus. One March evening, Marcus called, hesitant. "Dylan wants to know if you could help with a little money. He says Harper hasn't found a job yet, and baby Rowan is sick." I was quiet for a few seconds, looking out the window. Outside, late-season snow dusted the railing. I remembered the old days when Dylan had a fever and I sat up all night with a thermometer. I remembered Harper now, her face already fading in my mind. I spoke slowly and clearly. "Marcus, tell him this. Make a plan, get a job, then talk to me. No one rebuilds a future with an outstretched hand. I won't give money, but I'm willing to show him how to stand up." Marcus exhaled. "You're steady. Maybe that's exactly what he needs to learn." I smiled softly. "No, that's what I needed to learn. And it took half a life to learn it." In April, I repaired the back porch roof where rain had stained the wood. I hired 2 local workers, watched them, then helped paint the boards. The smell of fresh paint mixed with the first-of-season breeze, and the house looked like it was taking a long, healthy breath after a long illness. I replaced the smart lock, installed a doorbell camera, and set the auto alerts. For the first time in years, I felt the house was truly mine in safety, not fear. Each morning, when the doorbell chimed lightly because the wind tripped the sensor, I smiled. "Thank you, Evan. See? I'm keeping my promise." Money-wise, I steadied too. Savings held thanks to a small investment Talia helped me reset. I opened a second account and named it Rainy Day, for health and surprises only. Watching the number climb slowly each month, I felt like I was tending a tree I knew would bloom even if it took time. One evening, I posted in the Women Over 60 Thrive Together group, "When our children grow up, mothers have the right to grow up too. When they grow, we get to grow as well, grow our voice, our boundaries, our self-respect." I didn't expect it, but within a few hours, dozens of responses poured in. "Claudia, you wrote the words in my heart." "Thank you. I thought I was selfish, now I don't." The line, "Mothers have the right to grow too." I printed it and stuck it on my mirror. I read each line, my heart warm like I was hearing a chorus where I'd just sung the first note. Turns out I was never alone. There's a whole generation of women who've quietly endured and are now relearning how to stand tall. At the end of May, Maeve asked me to take a road trip along the Blue Ridge Parkway. "We deserve to see summer in the mountains, Claudie," she said, "and we don't have to ask anyone's permission anymore." I laughed. 2 weeks later, I bought a wide-brimmed straw hat and tied on a pale blue ribbon, a small reward for myself. The trip lasted 4 days. Winding roads, cool wind, wildflowers bursting on both sides. Sometimes we stopped at an overlook and silently watched a sea of clouds drifting. Maeve said, "Time stands with the steadfast, Claudie. It doesn't make us young again, but it gives the truth back." I turned to her and smiled. And that truth, in the end, is the only place we can sleep well. After the trip, I came home with different energy. I started painting again, not just one piece, but a trio. I named them Home, Boundaries, Freedom. Home is the wooden porch with slanting sunlight across the rose pots. Boundaries is a half-open gate with blue morning mist outside. Freedom is the Blue Ridge at sunset violet blending into orange, peaceful and wide. I hung the 3 pieces in the living room, right where Evan's wedding photo used to be. Not to replace it, but to continue it because I know even true love needs boundaries to last. One afternoon, Talia called. "Claudia, are you free next weekend? I'd like to invite you to speak at the community center. Topic is protecting the assets and rights of older adults. I think your story will inspire people." I smiled lightly. I've never spoken in front of a crowd. Just talk like you're telling Maeve. The true story is always the strongest. I hesitated a few seconds, then nodded. "Okay, I'll try." That night, I practiced in front of the mirror. The room reflected a 66-year-old woman, silver in her hair, but bright eyes, a low, clear voice, steady. I looked at myself and said, "My name is Claudia Hart. I used to think old age meant losing the right to decide. I was wrong. The moment I dared to say, 'That's enough,' I started living honestly." I paused, breathed deep, then smiled. "Not bad, Claudia." The next morning, I printed my speech and marked breathing points in red. On the table sat a cup of chamomile tea and a new notebook. The cover read, "Keep Growing." I opened the window. The early sun poured in, gold scattered across the wood floor. Outside, the roses blazed. Each bloom rose up without anyone teaching it how. I whispered, "Time has finally stood with us, not because we're stronger than anyone, but because we chose to be steadfast." The house was quiet, but I could hear my own heartbeat steady, sure, and calm. I knew the journey wasn't over, but I'd gone far enough never to return to the place where I was overrun, and for the first time in a long while, I felt not just surviving, but truly alive. One Sunday afternoon, as the sun slanted across the porch and gold light fell on each rose petal, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, no name saved. I was going to let it ring out, but something made me pick up. "Mom?" The voice was husky, slow, a little shaky. I held my breath. "Dylan?" On the other end, a few seconds of silence. Then quick breaths, like someone fighting back tears. "Yes, it's me. I don't know where to start." I sat on the wooden porch chair and watched the rose fence tremble in the breeze. "Start with the truth," I said softly. He drew a long breath. "Harper and we broke up. She moved back to her mother's. And me, I'm working at a gas station out near Boone. I'm renting a small room. Not much, just a bed and an old radio. But it's peaceful." Dylan's voice caught halfway through. I didn't jump in. I just listened. Listened, like you listen to a river that once raged and is finally slowing itself down. "Mom," he went on, hesitant, "I'm not calling to ask for money. I'm not asking to move back in. I just wanted to say, you were right. I had to hit real life to understand what you did wasn't out of anger, it was to keep your dignity. Thank you for not letting me trample you." A light breeze swept across the porch, the rose leaves whispering. My eyes stung, but not from pain. For years I'd wished to hear an apology. When it finally came, I realized I didn't need to win. I just needed to see my child bow to his own mistakes. I said quietly, "Dylan, I hear you. But you know, an apology is only the first step. Keep growing through your actions." "I understand," he answered, voice small as wind. "I'll try." "No, I will." Then silence. I heard a car engine somewhere and a radio in the background playing "Take Me Home, Country Roads," the song Evan used to sing along to whenever we drove the Blue Ridge. "Do you remember this song?" I asked. Dylan gave a faint, genuine laugh. "Of course, Mom. Dad used to play it every time we went on a picnic." "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Old song. Never out of date like honesty." We didn't say anything else. We let the music and the wind fill the space. When the call ended, I set the phone down and looked out at the soft blue of the distant mountains. A valley wind rose, cool and true. It felt like the Blue Ridge was breathing with me lighter, no longer clenched around old resentment. I didn't forgive right away. Forgiveness is a journey, not a moment. But something in me shifted, like a long-shut window opening after a long winter. I stood and went inside. The room was full of afternoon light. Evan's Tiffany lamp glowed warm, dragonflies casting shadows on the wall. Whenever I look at it, I feel him there quiet, kind, gently nodding. "Do you see, Evan?" I whispered toward the mountains. "The boy is finally learning to be a real adult." I smiled, then turned back to the easel. A new canvas waited, unsigned. I took a brush and wrote in small, even letters, "Claudia Hart, 66, still here, I'm still here." Only 3 words, but a declaration. I'm still here after being pushed to the basement, after papers demanding control, after cold words. I'm still here, calm, clear, and free. I opened the window. The scent of climbing roses poured in. The house murmured with leaves, with wind, and with the sound of my own deep breath. I knew, from now on, this home belongs to the one who knows how to keep it. Not just me, but all the women who've been shoved out of the very places they built, just because kindness was mistaken for weakness. I sat down, poured myself an herbal tea, opened my notebook, and wrote, "Today, my son called and offered his first apology." I didn't cry, didn't shake, I just smiled, knowing time has finally stood with the steadfast. Peace doesn't come from beating someone, it comes from not losing yourself. Outside, the sun sank behind the blue ridge. Orange mixed with purple across the porch roof, bathing the house in quiet color. I went to the yard, set the teapot on the wooden table, and sat alone watching the evening come slowly. For the first time in years, I didn't feel empty. I felt enough. Enough to forgive without forgetting. Enough to love myself again without fearing judgment. Enough to know that even without anyone's approval, I still deserve peace. I looked up and saw a new star appear small and bright. "Thank you, time," I whispered. "Thank you for teaching me that sometimes boundaries are the highest form of love." If you've listened this far, tell me, where are you watching from? Maybe each of us has been Claudia at some point when kindness is tested, when lines blur, when love and self-respect force us to choose. If this story touched you, leave a comment, tell me what you think, or if you've been through something similar. Every share, every like, every time you hit subscribe doesn't just help me continue this journey, it helps carry the stories of mothers who learn to say no a little farther. Thank you for walking the whole way with me, so that today, in a home full of sunset and roses, I can smile and say, "I'm Claudia Hart, 66 years old, still here, still free. And at last, still at peace."